Okie dokie. Let's just give that a quit. Oh dear. Oh, well, what I should probably do first off is, for the Stream Deck, I should probably put a mute button on my Stream Deck. Just so if I need to sneeze, I can mute the audio. I don't know how to do that. What's the weirdest thing is, right, I'm like, scene? Hold on. Audio input capture. Yeah, okay. I'm really bad at streaming. Right, toggle. How do you mute the microphone? Oh, God. These are probably. I wish there's some better streaming software than Ice Streamlabs, just because it's like. Audio input capture. There we go. So what does that do? So I do that. It does mute. Okay, that's not very clear. Mute. Okay, excellent. Let's put that in a sensible place. Yeah, one would. One second. Stream Deck icon library. Record. Live. Stream. Why I'm doing this here, I don't know. Yeah, guess it's that, isn't it? Okay. Cool. All right. So. Okay, that's the BRB scene. Okay, and I've got mute. Cool. All right. Let's move my mute over here. In fact, you can't see what I'm doing. It's not very exciting. There we go. Right. There we go. Put that there, and then that can go there. Look at this high-tech setup. Great. Had a Stream Deck for 8. I've got 2 Stream Decks actually, because I'm an efficiency boy. But I've not been very organised recently, so I'm normally very organised. Actually, I recorded a video ages ago where I put out a thing about. Hang on. Because I had people comment on how organised my computer is. This is a new computer as well. Pose them there. Do you get a thing where it's like part of the modern condition where you're so overstimulated and behind on everything in your life that you can't get any of it done, and your backlog of shit to do is endless. So you're like, let's spend time instead of doing all those useful things, streaming about Fossil and Kakoune, which is actually no, but there's a reason for all of this, right? So there's an end goal with this, to be fair. With oh shit, sorry, I've got a little problem with a bottle of Huel here. God, leaking everywhere. Shit. Yeah, there's no goal to all this. So like, I have recorded yesterday. I might re-record it because I was talking too fast. That's a problem I have. I talk quite quickly. I think sometimes people don't understand what I'm saying, but so I might re-record it. So this is part of that, so you can get that video out and refresh my talking points, because I just record these videos one shot normally, and I don't really take notes because taking notes distracts me from remembering what I've got to say, and I won't remember what I've got to say in all of my notes. So I just have to kind of get it in my mind and keep it there, because I'm weird, and if I write it down, writing down outline doesn't actually help. And I can't read from scripts, and it's just how my little mind works. I just have to talk. I tend to see a variation of the thing I mean in real time. So Yeah, but there's an end goal to all of this. So with Fossil and Kakoune, right? So the video is about basically Kakoune. Oh, not Kakoune. Sorry, Fossil as an alternative to GitHub. It's become more pressing because GitHub has been going through some extremely fast and shitification at the minute, flying through, being terrible at a rate of knots. So first I've looked at alternatives. I think I've covered this on another stream, but first I've looked at alternatives for GitHub. Let's turn my volume up a little bit. Some alternatives for GitHub itself, like Codeberg, SourceHut, that sort of thing, and didn't really love any of them. And I saw, interestingly, I think it was from someone at GitHub the other day, yesterday, on Hacker News, with the reply that I've had in mind, which is like, it will be like the Twitter effect, right? Where, like when a certain asshole bought Twitter, it meant that a lot of people moved to alternative platforms, right? But a significant amount still stayed on Twitter, and there's not enough moving to gain critical mass to have a new default. So the thing that is not ideal about that is it just sort of spreads things out. And when it comes to open source and the little world we built ourselves into, it's very much geared around single source of truth, right? So NPM is also being awful. We have mirrors like PNPM, Yarn, stuff like that, which I think don't pull directly from NPM. I think they do actually physically mirror it. I think. I'd like to confirm that, but yeah, it means that, you know, you've got we over the last sort of like how many years of technology, we've sort of centralized everything. Part of the thing that made Web3 and crypto people sound even more ludicrous than they managed to do on their own is this thing of saying, well, no, the open internet, everyone owns it, and like at record speed, all the Web3 companies just sort of like they circled around a handful of businesses extremely quickly. And before this era, we were very much about build a standard, use a standard, and like a lot of those standards actually worked just fine, and would continue to work just fine. But we just decided no, so we'll let a company do it because, you know, they'll put money in it, and I'm just convincing myself that open source is the best thing ever. Anyway, no, but yeah, like, so you'd have companies put money and polish behind stuff, and then they're done taking over. Like, so things like there's protocols like Yammer and whatever, like with the other one, like Pigeon. What was it, ICQ or whatever it's called? There's like standards for like P2P chat. There's IRC, which did basically everything, or you know, could have done everything that like Slack and Microsoft Teams does for the most part, right? But yeah, we moved away when some Silicon Valley company in 2010s went, yeah, we've got this thing. Forget the standard, we've got it, and it's using this new fancy technology, and it's incidentally completely closed, and we own all data. But you know, or things like the modern forum is dying in favor of Discord, where it's not like the information's not indexable, it's not shareable, and it just means that publicly available information on the internet is slowly dying off. All the forums are dying in favour of Discord because Discord's more slick. Instead of writing a really slick open source chat forum thing, we just download Discord and allow a pretty evil, you know, corporation to I'm not sure how evil Discord are as a company. They've done some sort of very sketchy shit recently. I think basically, like, most companies aren't really to be trusted, you know? Wait, back in 1 second. Hello again. Sorry, I had to just run off and do something quickly. So yeah, we had a bunch of standards, and we moved away from standards and centralized around a bunch of companies because it was basically more convenient and more polished. And those standards fell by the wayside because Git is a standard, right? You can just host Git. It's not crazy. You can just do it. But then, when you get into things like NPM, everyone wants things to be very convenient, and we want a single place to install our JavaScript libraries to do something that's to do left pad or is number. Shout out John Schlinker. 1 second.
Did she run out?
Anyway, I've been doing a thing recently. I've been trying to sort of de-evil the software that I use. Right, I've said this a bunch of times, and it's going all right. I think got a little ways to go. And I was like, "Oh, you use a Mac?" Yes, I do use a Mac, because unfortunately, Apple are definitely evil, right? But they're one of the less evil of the big evil tech companies. It's an extraordinarily low bar. It's something snakes wouldn't struggle with. But does that make sense? I don't know if that analogy makes sense. Anyway, the point is, it's a very low bar, and Apple are the best of an extremely bad bunch. And we'll see as they push now into services stuff. And don't worry, Apple are getting worse. I'm not like some Apple fanboy. I like Mac OS because basically it's like Linux but with polish and software that runs on it, right? If Linux was viable for me, I'd be using it tomorrow. It just isn't, unfortunately, and that's not again another common internet thing of skill issue, bro. It's no. See this only runs on a Mac, right? See this, it's a good browser, only runs on a Mac. See lots of software that I use only runs on a Mac, but also the quality of utilities is high. It's pretty much as fast. It's pretty much as efficient. The hardware is incredible. Everything just works. And in all other ways, it's so much like Linux you wouldn't believe. And all these people going, "Oh, I'm switching from Windows to Linux." There's £600 MacBook Neos, which is the perfect computer for 90% of people, and it's better than anything else you can buy for the money by such a wide margin. It's not even funny. Same with Mac Minis as well. It's just a phenomenal little computer. You can get them on a good day for £400, and they are fucking amazing. And it's you know what I mean? The point is, Apple are least evil. But so I moved away from. I got rid of it. Adobe is gone now. Although I am also using some Apple software to replace my Adobe habit. Sketch are not an evil company. Shout out Sketch. Profoundly unevil. We should be supporting them, so I don't use Figma anymore. Figma are fucking atrocious as a company. In fact, my last company I was working at, I started transitioning them over to Sketch as well. Not really for the sort of ideological aspects of it at all. It wasn't based in that. It was more Sketch has some killer features when it comes to actually sharing files around, which don't exist in Figma. It's actually really much better when it comes to the client or the non-user side management stuff is so much better in Sketch. It's not even funny, and also it's massively cheaper. So Figma's really cheap or free. So you get people going, "Oh, Figma's free." No, Figma isn't free. If you're a professional, Figma's not free. Figma's not even cheap. It's quite expensive actually when you're professional, and also if you're working with developers. Figma's actually really goddamn expensive. So a developer seat is, I think it's £12 or £13. Then your pro design seat is something like £25. But if you need certain features, which we did, so we wanted some sort of version management thing. Again, that comes in the standard single price you pay for Sketch. That meant that your single seat for a designer is $50. And I think the dev seats go up to 22. So if you've got 10 developers and 3 designers or 15 developers, you see it and this is and if you've got a license, if you've got this on your dock, you're paying for it. If you don't, you're not. And it's $10, $15, something, I don't know. Sketch is cheap. and version management comes for free. It's much more rational. The workflow is really good, and we were sold on the idea that allowing product people and whatever to know, and third parties to knows about, and live files and write all over them was a good idea. IRL, that never actually shook out, and everyone hates it, and most people don't even bother with it. So Sketch that doesn't allow you to do that unless you're an editor. So you can do the same. Well, I'm talking about Sketch now. But yeah, if you're a designer or in the Sketch desktop app, you can do the same shit as Figma, watch the mice wiggle around, work collaboratively, all that kind of shit. But yeah, if you're a reviewing person, so you're like a developer or a third party, you just get the web view, which is like a snapshot of the canvas. It's actually a much better workflow. It just sounds worse. But getting back to my main point, right, the eviling stuff is GitHub has gone to shit, right, recently. And I actually quite like GitHub, that's the thing. So Mitchell Hashimoto did an open thing the other day about Ghosty, which I'm not using currently. But yeah, the Ghosty terminal is moving off of GitHub. I've not said where they're going yet. Again, there's like probably some commercial stuff. I imagine they'll end up somewhere commercial. It's a big enough project, it probably needs it. And no one is on Codeberg, so you need to have good. Like, it might be GitLab or something like that, right? Because I was GitLab for years, and I moved to GitHub and I had a GitHub account since forever, but I only started really using it properly in must have been about 2020, 2021 maybe. I started using it for real, because just a means of putting a comment on and downloading shit, right? I didn't use it for my own personal stuff, and obviously when Microsoft bought it. And then they made personal repositories free. I was like, oh, okay, let's see what the fuss about. And just without knowing it, I just sort of moved off of GitLab. I've still got my GitLab account, just, whatever. Actually, I've still got repos in there, I didn't move over. Anyway, point is, GitHub's sort of really struggling, and I started looking at alternatives, in part for fun, but also, I don't like Microsoft. If I say that Apple are one of the better evil companies, Microsoft possibly the worst, or amongst the worst. It's a toss-up between Microsoft and Meta for being the worst big tech company. They're both pretty bad, and I despise Microsoft, really, to be honest. Although I have an Xbox, so everyone's a hypocrite. But yeah, so I was like looking at alternatives to GitHub, and then that led me down this path of, because it's that thing, that sort of splintered network effect. You're never getting anything that's really going to replace GitHub, because you've spent years having it being the de facto place to store open source repositories. For personal work, it's completely separate. And I think for the most part, all these other platforms will serve to do will grumble about it, but will still use GitHub for open source stuff, and will just be pissed off. And the minute you're pissed off and grumbling but not doing anything is a perfect scenario for a company to be inactive. Because if not enough people are leaving, they have no incentive to actually make it better. And if you're just going to grumble and not do anything, they know that you're a wuss, so they'll just not fix anything. So either you have this en masse, Microsoft shat themselves a little bit recently really, it wasn't actually people moving. What really did it was Valve. And to a little extent, also framework. But the biggest one was Apple, right? So the whole thing with Microsoft's doubling down and saying, we'll make Windows 11 better, isn't, you'd say it's down to people saying we don't like the AI features. It's not the first time Microsoft put in things into their operating system that are objectively terrible and then refuse to remove them, right? And they take years normally to do this. They've done it much faster. And obviously the uptake of people going to Linux is not probably as significant as you think. There's like the network, there's like what social media says versus what numbers say, and like Linux desktop growth is not super high. Mac OS desktop growth is much higher. That's where people are actually going, right? So your layperson's experience, if you're a nerd, right, if you're the sort of person who watches a stream about someone talking about two obscure pieces of development technology, then this doesn't apply to you. Your average person on the street will hear the word Linux and go, oh, it's free and it's not buggy, and I don't like Microsoft and I don't like how annoying it is, let's give it a go. And then very quickly, with the most polished and easiest to use distro, will nope the fuck out after a couple of weeks, best case scenario, because unless they're particularly tenacious, because Linux is just not ready for public consumption yet. The exceptions that rule being people are really into PC gaming, right? So factor one, why am I going on top? Anyway, doesn't matter. The factor one on that is Steam, right? Valve. So they do the whole Proton thing. It's effectively the Steam Deck effect, right? When they put Steam OS it's going to actually shift some bums over, because it's like you can have all the stuff you've got now where the games work better and you don't have to have Microsoft, and it's like a good trade-off, right? So that is actually shifting the needle, which made Microsoft a little bit sketchy. But the real watershed moment, ultimately, was actually the MacBook Neo, because macOS is a better OS than Windows. It's not a question of opinion. It's purely factually better, as is Linux, right? Don't forget, Linux started out as an open source copy, effectively, of Unix, and macOS is Unix, right? So yeah, it's they're both of a better class than Windows. But Mac's very easy. There's a little learning curve, I think, for non-macOS users to get used to certain things, like the buttons being on the other side and Finder being different to whatever. There's a lot of compelling features for your average end user. So yeah, that's that sort of thing. That's enough to scare them. But if you go like, oh, I'm on Codeberg. Okay, Codeberg. It's like when always been making lots of loud noise about moving to Thread. I mean, I did sack off my Twitter, but I wasn't a major Twitter user. I found it a depressing, unpleasant influence on my life. But yeah, people loudly declaring they're moving to Mastodon. Have you fucking used Mastodon? So it's that same thing, right? So SourceHut I think it's kind of crap. It's probably engineered moderately well. Codeberg looks like GitHub but worse, right? But open source. So in reality, most people just say they're doing it. Notice the traffic on their open source things going down if they want to be successful with open or whatever. They want to use, like, because there's like the aspect of like, I'm in the camp of, if you make something open source, you just put it out because you've done it and then see if other people want it, right? I'm not like going out my way to say I'm making a product. I need this to like raise my personal profile as a whatever, right? But for a lot of people, that is actually their motivation, to be seen to be like an open source person who makes stuff and please star my repo, that sort of person. They don't have much success on Codeberg with that because people go, no. Especially if it's some JavaScript thing and there's already 4 of them that exist, that person's just going to stay on GitHub. So, you know, getting back to my original point, I started looking at alternatives to GitHub, and then I was like, what about alternatives to Git as well? Because when you think about it, I mean, to say Git sucks isn't true. I don't actually have much of a problem with Git. Like, in the, like, 85% of the time, Git's just fine, right? But then that 15% of the time when it's not, you'll have a horrible time. All of that Git foo, right? All that, the more esoteric parts of Git and all these tools which are required. Because, like, Git was built for a different scale to what most of us operate at, right? Like, Linus Torvalds is not a stupid, like, objectively, he's a clever chap, right? So, like, yeah, and he runs a massive open source project, right? So, thousands of contributors, lots and lots of code, lots and lots of potential for churn. He has very specific needs, and he built a tool for himself that solved those problems. And then everyone started using it because, effectively, I think in part, I know I did, because I was like, oh, the Linux guy made it, must be good. And if you're around at the time, honestly, how many people went, the Linux guy made it, it must be good, you know? And then, yeah, SVN was around, and if you use like Mercurial, and there's like Perforce. I think Perforce was probably a thing back then, I imagine. But anyway, Git became this de facto. It probably didn't necessarily need to be. And yeah, it's like that thing of saying, like, you know, well, I'm doing a personal blog. Let's just fire up a Docker container or maybe do some K8s or something. I don't know, like the likes. I could use this. I could use like WordPress or any CMS, or build it. Let's do it in Next.js. Actually, yeah, the processing the thumbs up on the things. Let's use a Lambda for that. Yeah, that's AOS. What are you charging nowadays? Oh yeah, we need 4 different S3 buckets for. Do you know what I mean? That tendency to saying like you need to add complexity to something to make it feel more legitimate. Git does sort of fit into that a little bit. Not in a way that's particularly egregious, right? Like the whole thing of like, yeah, people saying, I interviewed a developer a couple of years ago, and part of their interview process, they were like, "Oh yeah, I've built my personal website." He had a good interview. He had a really good interview, and he did get the job again actually. And he's a decent developer. But part of his interview, he was like, "Oh yeah, here's my personal website. Yeah, so I've done the whole thing in React, so like and it was just a website, right? It's just a website with some pages on it." And I don't think he realised that in the room, it's like this does not say what you think it says, right? This says over. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to do that. You can for fun. I think to be fair to him, I think he did say, "I don't need to do this. It might just be for fun." To be fair, I'm not sure he said that, but either way, if he had said that, then that's what I've just said is possibly unfair. Because if you want to do it for fun and shits and giggles, cool. Okay, go for it. Go nuts. Like, I've done stuff like that. Everyone has, right? But like, some people unironically will go, "Let's make this as complicated as possible." And then Git is not as egregious because it is the de facto. But how many of the features of Git do you need, right? Because like 9 times out of 10, it's mergers, which are not that fun in Git. They're better. The bar Git raised was better for mergers than SVN, right? Which was true. But it's not good, right? Let's not pretend it's good. It's not. And it's still messy. It's still, whatever. And then we've made all this stuff around like PRs and whatever, to sort of help manage it. And then we've gone to the road saying there's this, although most of the stuff I've done development-wise has been on the internet, I guess I do consider myself a web developer like type person first, but like not intentionally. It's certainly my least favorite type of coding, I think. But then, where it's so prevalent, there's this whole thing of like, there is your JavaScript dev, right? If you are a JavaScript developer, there's this stigma almost attached to a JavaScript developer of saying, "Let's grab a thing off the shelf and make it complicated, and we need to do this." And then you get like someone else from a different development industry going, "Well, you could just do this and it'd be done in like 2 minutes." And there's this like pragmatism that gets lost when you get into like it's a little unfair. It's not entirely true. Some of it is justified, but like some of that pragmatism's gone, right? And you make things really complicated. And it's like, you always need Git. Of course you do. But yeah, how many of those features do you need? Do you want to have them in your back pocket just in case you do need them? Or when it's like 5 developers and actually, which is like most size teams, what those features do you need? And this is where like Fossil became really interesting when I started looking at it, because it's a very different mindset. It's not as you say, well, let's use Docker because it's the best. Docker's, I personally miss Vagrant. I thought Vagrant was sick because it's so simple, and like a lot of the scenarios you'd lend to, let's do this all in Docker. If you need it, cool. If you don't, why do you still use it? Like, a lot of the time you can just, do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be like good old times about this. Obviously, I'm not trying to be a Luddite here, but like, there's that brief step of going, what is the right tool to use, not what is the most popular tool that's being used. Let's use popular tool, without that first thought of, do we need the things this provides? In the case of Docker, it's actually quite an easy, Docker's a moderately easy sell, to be honest. If you're using like pre-built images and stuff, it's fine. Like configuring, I don't know, like there's elements of Docker that are quite painful, but a lot of the time it can be very, very straightforward, to be honest. And yeah, so yeah, Fossil's very much of that old school mindset of like, not, it isn't itself, but the choice to use it is very much of that non-web dev thing. And I think that's why web developers haven't really looked at it. And it's very hard to see how popular it is, because the non-web dev people, aka the neckbeardy men who do the other things, of which there's many of them, aren't as social media-y, aren't as GitHub-y, aren't as shouty most of the time about what they're doing. And unless you're the kind of person who says, yeah, let's build some desktop software with React, which is dumb. So anyway, yeah, like, let's just chat about Fossil a little bit. So it's like quite. We're in a real. Well, not a real. This is like a little toy. In fact, this is Fossil related. This is the thing I'm doing with Fossil. It's just a doodle at the minute, right? Rewrapping parts of the Fossil CLI to make it a little bit nicer. This is just me fucking about in Ruby for the minute. don't scrutinize any of this too hard. It's not very good, but it it does do the thing. But yeah, so this thing is managed in Fossil. This is one of the things I'm testing out with it, right? So let's just open that up. So we're in FSL CLI, and we can do Fossil. In fact, my case, because I've got FSL, which is the name of it, and then I do status, and then there we go, right? So cut that out. So yeah, this thing is a Fossil managed thingy, right? So I can just do FSL timeline. Timeline. Let's see my professional messages. There we go. That's interesting. I did basically RB with Thor, and it turns out Thor is good. Thor is good. But yeah, so the way, let's just do a fresh. Let's just do a fresh, and then we'll just do. Yeah, let's call it test. Is a test already exist? No, let's cd into test. Okie dokie, and then what we'll do is we'll go into museum, and then we'll do fossil new. Oh, no, fossil init, isn't it? Fossil init, and then we'll call this one test.fossil. Do I have a test.fossil? I don't. Cool. And then we go back. 3 tests. Okay, should be right. There we go. Excellent. Cool. Right. So we do FSL open museum, and then we'll just do test.fossil. There we go. Excellent. Ooh. Found a bug in my. Okay, hang on. Oh. Okay. Well. This is dumb. I've done something dumb. There we go. If you know me, then actually let's do it. Let's do an actual. Yeah, fine. The fossil detection obviously does not work. Thank you to me, because that was never going to work. That was very silly. Anyway, right, so we're here. Let's clear this out. My voice is low. How about now? Better? So yeah, let's just create a file. Just make a, call this one words.md. Love it. Okay, and then let's just open up Words. So we've attached our fossil repository, because they don't have to live together, because fossil's just a, that's one thing where it's different, right? Fossil is a SQLite DB because it's made by the SQLite people. So in my video on this topic, let's bring this a little bit closer. Let's bring my microphone a little bit closer. There we go. In my video on this topic, that's the thing. Like if you're talking about like legitimacy, cool. If you're talking about legitimacy, in like developer cred, if Linux is top of the pile, SQLite is basically second, right? And they wrote this. So, but yeah, the sort of earlier I was saying Git was built to deal with the Linux scenario. Thousands of people contributing, and all the gates and whatever to make sure that actually you can make sure you manage their contributions. And SQLite's developed quite differently, right? It's a handful of people work on it and they know each other, which is more akin to what the vast majority of software engineering actually looks like, right? It's normally, if it's non-open source, that is, it's small teams, maybe like a couple of dozen developers normally, right? Working on a code base and working inside a single repo. I hope this text is big enough, actually. And that's what they built Fossil for, right? It's for that scale of work and that sort of work. So they've actually got an article on this about the differences in methodology, but let's just do this bit. So some words in the, okay. So, oh dear, what's going on now? There you go. So we've now got some changes inside our thing. So we can do FSL status, and there'll be nothing in there, right? So what we'll do is FSL add, and then we'll just do dot without everything, right? So wonderful. So added words or MD finished in whatever seconds, right? In fact, I'm like, that's not great. Let's just, yeah, I'll just write fossil. I won't use FSL for a bit. So FSL is my little wrapper, but I'll not use that because it's misleading as well anyway, to be honest. So yeah, what we've done, we've added words, and the thing first off to know is that in fossil everything's tracked forever. So now if I do fossil status, it's going to say added words or MD, and I can do fossil commit added and MD file, right? Whatever. So far, just like Git, right? So fossil timeline, I can see, there we go, added an MD file. Great, perfect. Just like Git, pretty straightforward. So the thing is as well, if I then go make a second change, so back in here, some more words, right? And then come back in here, I don't need to add this again. So once I've added it, I don't have basically there's no staging area. So once the file's added, it's just tracked forever. I can untrack it, but let's do fossil. Yeah, it's just tracked forever. So now I can just say fossil, commit, and then added another line, right? Fossil, commit, added another line, right? Great. So yeah, if I create a new file, say touch more words.md, right? Now I can do fossil extras, and I can see fossil extras basically says what the files that aren't tracked, right? So if I do fossil diff, well, nothing's in there because it's all committed. So there's nothing to commit because this is not tracked, and there's no stage. So that's that bit, which trips people up a little bit, but it's part of like the way they do things, because the sort of core philosophy of fossil is you commit the entire history, which is versus that whole thing, because there's basically like one of the big things that kills it for people, I think, is there's no squashing of commits, there's no rebase. That doesn't exist because the way fossil works is it wants you to keep your entire history, warts and all of the problems, everything, every mistake, every typo, every time you've whatever. You can amend stuff, you can do some history editing, but it treats it like something to be used very sparingly, rather than like curating a history. And personally, I mean, this varies depending on who you are and where you work or whatever, but I prefer a messier commit history because it gives you context, right, of what was going on. If someone curates, I think part of it is like some social pressure inside business. I mean, I do it more in personal repositories, that if you see some of my commits, they're ludicrous. They could be swear words, they could be like me calling myself a dickhead and laying out an entire paragraph of just crap, but like there's a degree of social pressure where you don't want to be seen to be committing quote unquote bad code. But if you're amongst peers and like people know that people make mistakes, like if you've got a low ego environment, it doesn't matter. And having those mistakes in a code base and not spending too much time curating what you say in a commit, I think is not just fine, I think it's desirable, because you get to see where you've moved backwards. If you go and revisit those commits, you get to see more context on why a certain decision was made. It's all well and good seeing the actual end resulting code, but you get all the steps in between, and you get a degree of that process, right, on a more granular scale. Because you've got PRs, the PR is a feature, right? That gives you the context of what you want, right? What you want adding. And the individual commits inside can be anything. You don't even have to see it, because the PR will show you, the actual sum total of the changes. But yeah, fossil wants you to have your entire history there, right? Curating stuff is not a thing. And I'll be a bit more on that in a minute. So I'm sort of retreading the video I recorded yesterday, but it's fine. So so if I don't add that other file, there's nothing to add, right? If I just quickly go back, and then while I'm here, I'm just going to do, what's going on here? Oh God, hang on. Let's just, something's happened with my terminal. Damn. Prompt. Let's just open that back up again. That has crashed. Okay, we'll use Ghosty instead then. Why not? So, where are we? Let's just go to CD test. Excellent. Step up Zellage. Cool. Right. Something very weird happened there. And we're going FSL. Yep. Cool. And then FSL. There we go. Excellent. Let's just zoom that in a little bit. Prints out some gnarly shit into the Okay, just close that. Right, so where were we? Yeah, so in our test directory, it's just the FSL. So fossil status, excellent. So yeah, I want you to keep your entire history, right? And no staging area. Plus, also, there's no. If we're ready to, like, we've committed these changes, right? So I've got my, let's do fossil timeline. Oh, can't type. And we've got three commits, right? Which Fossil calls check-ins. Where do we push them? We're ready for these to go. Well, I haven't pushed them because there's nowhere to push them. There is no pushing and pulling. So if this was attached to a real repository, I had a test one to show you, but I haven't got one. I haven't got one to hand actually at the minute. Where actually no, it's go to CD house thing a thing, and then Fossil timeline. Excellent. So FSL. Are there any files in here? There is. Okay. So FSL add. Let's add config.ruby, and then fossil commit. Adding a test file. Hey, there we go. Wonderful. So that's what happens, right? So basically, the very shit demonstration there of when you make a commit, it just automatically pushes, right? And anecdotally, from the Fossil people, this is what they say, and I would be inclined to believe them, because if you're going to believe someone, it should probably be the people who wrote SQLite, who do know what they're, despite some of their opinions on, like, you know, the religious stuff or whatever. When it comes to writing good software, they're writing good software, some of the best. And yeah, so the minute you commit, it just automatically pushes that to your remote. And it will, well, actually, what it actually does, it first it pulls the remote, and then it pushes at the same time in one motion. And the idea is you're always syncing, so it's still distributed, but where it's a third-party file, so you're not actually keeping your Fossil project alongside your code necessarily. You can, but you don't have to. It means you do multiple checkouts the way you could with, like, SVN, which is a very cool workflow we lost over the years. But unlike SVN, it's still properly distributed the way Git is. It just automatically does the pushing and pulling, right? And anecdotally, from the fans of Fossil I've seen, is a lot of the scenarios where you have really horrible merge stuff going on, and again, with that same philosophical thing of you just push your changes and don't worry too much about it and just carry on and show that history and don't edit that history or spend time editing that history, it works really well, because a lot of the mergers that would be required and a lot of that contention you would have just doesn't happen, apparently. I've not used this enough yet. I'm still very much early to playing with Fossil. It's still very much an experimentation territory for me. But yeah, so far it seems to be pretty cool. So yeah, a lot of those mergers don't even happen. All that contention around files doesn't really happen. So actually, the scenarios where you have to make these big gnarly mergers are pretty unlikely unless you're working on branches. And branching is also kind of interesting, right? So if we just do Fossil branch new, and we'll course one, I've called one previously Bilbo. Let's course one test. Let's course one Pete, and it's based off trunk, right? So we're saying instead of main, it's trunk. So we're on. Where am I? Ooh, hang on, where am I? LS. Oh, okay, that's another test. Cool. So let's go back into code test. No, CD test. Don't think. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that pushed as well. So what we'll do is, try that again. So we'll just do a branch. So branch, and we'll call this one, Dave, the branch, and we'll base it off trunk, right? So you do branch name basis, right? Ooh. Oh, branch new, yeah. Oh, new Pete trunk. There we go. Excellent. Right, so we've got a new branch, and we just do fossil. It doesn't automatically move you, so we do fossil. What do we do fossil branch? We can see where we are, right? And we're still on trunk. So fossil branch, or fossil update, actually, update, and then we'll call update Pete. So now we're on Pete, right? And then we'll come into here. We'll just make a change. We'll just like go into, we'll go into words, and then, even more words in this file, right? And then what we'll do is just fossil commit, added some stuff, whatever, right? Cool. So now we've added a commit to our Dave branch. So if we just do fossil branch, we can see we are on, sorry, Pete is the name of our branch. Obviously it's called Pete. And here's the thing. So if you've got like the standard workflow for branching and merging is the same thing. You merge it back in, right? But what gets more interesting is if I have a stale branch, so going back to sort of you keep your entire history, and I'm sort of keeping the biggest things you might know about already in Fossil, but I'm keeping it sort of like underneath my little hat for now, but I'll show you in a second, is what happens in Git when you're done with a branch, right? If it's an experiment or the work's not continuing or whatever, you either like wham a PR in, put a note at the top saying, and then that just withers, and also the work can just sometimes just get deleted, right? Well, you can delete work in Fossil, but again, they try and make you avoid it, or they want you to avoid it, because that context, right? Here's the little secret thing is, and also how I got to the point of looking at this as a GitHub replacement is Fossil UI. See, fun, huh? So this is its own little web server because it's an SQLite file. It is a little application. It's not just a repository. So if you look in here, let's just do that. Spoilers. We can see our history visually, right? So I've been doing this all on the command line, but we actually have this full thing here. And this is not just, I mean, this is cute, right, on paper, but that thing of like keeping your entire history, the way the SQLite people make their money, right, is they do services. They do service contracts for big, it's critical software in loads and loads of industries. Like SQLite's kind of a big deal. It's like the most popular database. I don't know if it's the most deployed piece of software, but it's probably top 3. Maybe some say it is the most deployed piece of software in the world. That's potentially true because every Android phone, every iPhone, every MacBook, every Linux installation, and every jet and countless other things all have at least one SQLite database on it. So I think every Android app on your phone and most iOS apps on your phone and your Mac and your Linux desktop have an SQLite database inside them. So I wouldn't be shocked if it is the most deployed piece of software. If it's not the most deployed, it's probably second, right? So when you have like a mission critical piece of software and a customer says to you, we have this thing, like we're doing some sort of mission critical thing. It's on like let's say it's on a boat, right? And if we get this wrong, our boat's going to fucking sink. We want to update our version of SQLite. We have this bug from this version, and then you have to go, shit. And this thing, we've got long-lived pieces of software, right? And you go, you have an old bug, and the thing that's the biggest thing is tech. Like this, the single most important thing to manage inside any software business is tech debt. It is making sure you make decisions that are good enough to, at worst case scenario, I think the best engineer in the entire world is the one who can say, I made a decision that worked well long enough for the time we needed that decision to hold, and when it came the time to change our minds, moving to a new idea wasn't that difficult, right? That's like the holy grail of software engineering, right? That it's not about how clever something is. It's like, can you do that thing, right? I think basically no one can, unless you're incredible. So, tech debt and the history of what you've done, and especially as a code base gets larger, is of critical importance, right? So you'd scramble through Git, you'd be like, let's look through Jira, let's check through emails. That's where Microsoft Teams. Who I talked to about that? Is it on an email? You have to try and scour the history of the context of what was going on at a particular point in history for either a bug to exist, to understand your knowledge of it, or to identify it in the first place. It's a thing, right? And I'm skirting around the cool bit here. Is we've got this timeline. You see the other buttons here, right? So if we go into added some stuff, right, and we'll click on our actual hash for our commit, and we've got a little diff. This is full on like a mini GitHub in a box. It's not very pretty. There's some UX problems, but it's extremely functional and robust. And yeah, I can do stuff like, say, add wiki. This is a new feature or whatever, right? Excellent. So now I've added a wiki, and it's very clever. It's added a wiki link to this. Let's also just create a ticket and just say, this is not very pretty. We'll say, added new feature has a regression in the thing. Shit's fucked, yo. Right? Got preview and then submit because I don't know. Anyway, go back to our timeline. Really cool, right? We've got a built-in wiki system, built-in ticket system, but going back to what I was saying, that's not the cool bit. The cool bit is this drop down. It's not just a timeline of commits, it's a timeline of fucking everything. So when we create this page, or when we update this page, it goes into the timeline. So I can see that when I've made this commit here, right, this check-in here, there's an associated document that's created at that time. This also keeps a related history of its, history as it pertains to this thing. So if I look at like the 30th of April 2026, I can see everything going on. There's this new ticket that existed. If I update this ticket on another day, that will go into the history. You can still see its links, right? So we can link this back, and it wiki links back to this commit. Or if I update this, or if I do the same with forum things, I get this unified history of everything I'm working on, right? And the second part to that is, when this is an SQLite database, when your SCM is an SQLite database, it's a database. You can query it because it is SQL, right? So if you want to have like that thing where Jira has like JQL and that sort of stuff, like you don't, that's, you've got the database, right? You haven't got all these extra layers of indirection to get to the information you need. It's pretty bananas. There's a JSON API, so you can build new tools off the back of this, which is one thing I'm hoping to do, because this is extremely good technologically, but man, the UX is dicks. So I'm trying to look at making my own sort of like pseudo front end to this, just leveraging what's there and just presenting it better, basically. But in terms of functioning, it's great. It all works. Now, so going back to my, so there's one half of that thing I was saying before, right? About that visual, that seeing all your history, warts and all, right? This is a very powerful thing to have. When we have 7 events. When this is like 150,000 events, or no, 100, like, let's say, like, what's a code base? Like, a code base could be like 20, 30,000. Like, for let's say you add like 5,000 commits a year, right, to a code base. Pre-vibe coding, I guess, probably would be that number. I don't want to be like, I've seen people piss out 1,000 commits in a day when they're smacking an LLM about. But let's say, like, yeah, if you put in, like, let's say you put in 1,000 commits a year, right, and at some point you have some sort of regression or some sort of bit of information, be able to jump back in history and see everything that was going on without having to go to any other systems. Also, this is like just this anywhere CGI runs, this runs. So to have this be your remote, so you saw my remote earlier, you just deploy this database, and there it is. It's just your remote. It's genius. But that was one half of that equation, right? Why it's good to see your history thing. Because what I was saying before is what happens to a branch that you don't want to work on anymore. This one here, we're done with Pete. What we can do is, let's just stop that for a second. We can do fossil, branch, Pete, close. Oops. Yeah. Oh, no, it's fossil, branch, close, Pete. There we go. Okay, and it says save new control artifact. So let's do a float actually. We'll just do fossil UI in a float, and then we've closed off Pete. It's not deleted, it's not gone, it's just closed, right? What we can also do with this tag of Pete, because effectively, like in Git, a branch is basically a reference to a single commit. In Fossil, it's a tag applied to an entire chunk of stuff. So tags work in the way that, unlike Git tags, tags work in the way that you expect tags to work in like a blog, right? Tags are tags, and not just like attached to single commits. So all of these things form the tag of Pete, right? Great. So we've closed this off. Pete's now closed off. We can also, don't want to see it anymore, we can do fossil branch hide Pete. Refresh again. There we go. All the commits on the Pete branch are now closed. The existence of the branch hasn't changed, right? It's changed back to check-ins only, so to clear things up. But now we've hidden it, right? So if we just do, I think we do fossil branch. Yeah, exactly. So now in our list, Pete's just gone. So if we do fossil, we're still on Pete though. Fossil update trunk. So now we're back on whatever. And we'll see another little fun feature here. Fossil undo. So a lot of actions are also undoable, right? So if you make a mistake, so again, you've got no staging area, so you can undo certain actions if you decide that you changed your mind, which is pretty fucking cool. And yeah, so it sort of starts to form this sort of like quite clever picture, really, where you go, well, you know, because like the thing with Fossil is it's not new. This is also, it's like a couple of years newer than Git, and for the right sort of thing, it probably is the better piece of software, right? I've not spent enough time with it to really find out where it becomes a problem, only because, you know, I've just been playing with it for a week, maybe, not especially in that much anger, so I'm not qualified to say, at this point, should you use this, yes or no? That's not, you know, don't take my word as gospel. It's definitely something worth playing with. And if you're working on either a solo project or, I mean, I think it's highly incompatible with open source. To be honest, I think Git's the place to do that for sure, because there's no formal PR workflow in Fossil. But you think you've gone to a point where we're talking, oh, let's do Git work trees, which is a big thing in LLM world now, where they check out multiple copies of a repo, so their silly little agents can fuck stuff up in parallel. And then you've got, like, you know, stacked commits. I've had a go at graphene before. Fuck me, graphene's awful. And it's like we've gotten to a situation where, like, well, the thing is you get to the thing when you go, like, this has added so much not complexity, you can add a lot of complexity to it, and then you're sort of adding more layers on, or again, use the simpler tool. So I think, yeah, not compatible with open source. I think, you know, if you're managing public contributions to a Fossil repo without someone building something around it in the way that, like, a GitHub for Fossil doesn't exist, right? Because most people just deploy it internally on their own shit. But yeah, like, if a GitHub for Fossil doesn't exist, but you need something like that to manage open source. I don't think it's made, and intentionally it's not made for that sort of scale. And there's lots of reading materials about the methodology. I think it's like, let's go back into here. So I think it's like bizarre. I can see Fossil SCM bizarre, right? I can't remember. Bizarre model of fossil. There we go. There's an article. Oh no. I can't remember. There's an article on it on like the differences in sort of like the sort of philosophical differences between them. One's like a bazaar and one's a cathedral, right? So like, I just fuck it. I can't be asked to paraphrase it. I'm terrible at paraphrasing this shit. The point is, like, in IRL, right? If you're doing work, you're working on a product. You're going to be you and some other people, n number of other people, right? And you and n number of other people that you know, who you speak to, and if you share all of this sort of shared context thing is incredibly useful in that context, right? Seeing a timeline of everything that's happened. You've got, I mean, these tools are shit. There's a forum, you've got an internal forum, you've got a chat room, you've got tickets, you've got a wiki. These tools don't work they're not that nice to use. They're very much like developer built in the year 2003 vibes. But they're functional. So like that's the sort of the very, very, very high level overview. Like you can do stuff like you can amend. If you just like open up fossil and just do fossil help, or just fossil, you get a bunch of stuff you can do. But you can do fossil help, right? And you've got a bunch of stuff you can do that exists inside fossil. You've got things like blames. You've got things like obviously branching, changes, diffing. There's bisects. There's all sorts of stuff, right? You can see a timeline, which I use quite a lot. Trees. You have tag management. There's tons of stuff you can do. There is merge here. I don't know. There's a little thing here. Where is it? Yeah, there's push and pull. I don't actually know what they're for. There is stashing. So stashes also work quite differently because stashes remember their parent. Because again, like you've got this whole hierarchical thing with fossil because it is a DB. It is a relational database, right? So they treat data like that. So if we come into let's say add an MD file, we can see the timeline, so the ancestors of this commit, but you can also see the descendants of this commit, right? So let's say you do some work and that leads to something else, you get to isolate its descendants and parents, which you can't do in Git. So there's some really powerful stuff here, right? And it's just me scratching the surface, So, where's that gone? So yeah, there's some fossil does some really, really interesting and powerful stuff. It's really, really good. I think it's not going to be for everyone. I don't know what the pull and push actually do. So fossil sync is an interesting one here. So sync is basically if you're offline for whatever reason, you can just sync up. So let's say if you make a commit, it automatically gets pushed and pulled for you, right? But if you're offline, you can just say fossil sync and it will sync. So if you just do fossil help sync, right? Sync. And then here we go. So yeah, sync all, right? So you can sync every remote on your system in one command. So if you're going to be like on a plane and working on a bunch of stuff, let's say you're flying to Australia, right? And you're going to be a plane for Australia's like a day's worth of travel from fucking everywhere apart from New Zealand, right? So you're like, I'm on a plane to Australia and I need to work in this time. I'm an important person flying business class. I use the real cutlery, and and you get you have this time offline. You can pull all of your repos all at once, right? So you sync before you go, and then you work on a bunch of different stuff. And then when you get to your hotel room, you just do fossil sync, and it will just sync up all your shit automatically again. And in the meantime, again, a lot of the merge things that have happened maybe while you're away. Most of them have been solved. A lot of them should have been solved. I can't speak to the merging experience too much because I haven't done much of it yet because I've not used it enough. I've done like experimental, like if you're working as one person, you can't really I've got like a much larger sort of like project I'm working on, which I might migrate to, or at least experimentally migrate to fossil. And see how that goes. I'm a little bit scared to do it because it's an existing like big boy real code base, and I don't lose my Git. I think so. That's another thing actually. If we do fossil help, is this it? Git. Hey, yeah, there we go. This stuff. So I need to investigate this. Fossil git export. Write content from the fossil repository into the git repo in directory mirror. The git repository is created if it does not already exist. If the git repo does already exist, the new content added to the fossil since the previous export is appended. Repeat this command where the new check-ins are added to the fossil repository in order to reflect those changes in the mirror, right? If the mirror option is omitted, the repository from the previous invocations, I don't know what that means, fossil git import mirror, TBD, fossil git status. So you can basically mirror a fossil repo to git as well, which is pretty cool. I don't know how bidirectional that is. I need to do lots more reading. But yeah, before I use this in a project where I get a better idea of, so like I've used it on like little, so I've got my dot files and a couple of like little tiny scripts at the minute. I'm sort of running through Fossil. I've not used it on anything bigger than that yet. So I could eat all of these words. I find it appealing. But yeah, on that other one, obviously, yeah, we have like actual, there's like it uses linear and there's like a product manager and all that sort of stuff to sort of say what needs to get worked on, prioritization, and yeah, it gets worked on more. It's just me like coding. It's just me working on it at the minute. But I do. I'm not doing any day job code at the moment. Besides that, but yeah, I still work in like quite a interesting way. Not interesting way, like a proper way. Like I'm working on it as a product, right? So I sort of see how that goes, I guess. So. But yeah, I don't know what that workflow would look like, or a workflow would look like inside Fossil, because I'm very much based on PRs, and I don't know there's a formal way of. Again, that's a bit of a research project for another day when I bring it up. But I want to keep my commit history in Git, so I'd have to find out if I can import that into Fossil. That'd be interesting. So yeah, I don't know what that workflow would look like, because it works in like a broadly sort of like GitHub style like PR workflow. So literally like branch, single feature or single topic branch that's moderately short-lived, and then gets like, and then main is production code sort of thing. Keep it pretty simple, because it just works. And again, it's just me working on it. But yeah, the interesting thing with that is actually a lot of those things where recently I've gone cold turkey and I've stopped using LLMs at all after more than experimenting. I've used them sort of like on that same code base actually, in like not in anger, but like to gain some, what I thought at the time was gain some ground. A lot of that is actually kind of quite zero sum game, but I have used them enough to know that I don't like them. Skill issues, bro. No, it's just they're just bad. They're just bad. Like so. But yeah, so what I was doing previously a lot, and what I might still do a little bit. So the exception to that rule is I will use it. I'm using LLMs a little bit as like the advanced Google thing, which still makes you feel a bit grubby. So my little history with AI, quote unquote AI, which is not fucking AI, but whatever, is going from being curious to being, oh, this could be cool, in the context of development, to, oh, this kind of works, to, oh, let's oh, this is fucking terrible. Like, that thing of letting it actually write some code for you and it does a really bad job. So then going through those hoops of learning how to actually drive it well. But and then I went back from that for a while, and then went back to, this is just a shortcut to getting me information out of Stack Overflow like posts, right? Which is extremely good at, to be fair. And then I went into doing the whole sort of like agentic crap for a bit, which was ultimately a mess. Felt like my skills atrophied really, really quickly. Although you're like, this is not like a vibe code scenario. This is like it has all of the skill files. It has all of the you write a plan, and then you break it up into, like, say, when we like plan based, that doesn't work. You can't make them one shot anything. So it'd be like, write a plan. I'd manually break it up into chunks. I'd then decide what chunks worked on and how that was phased, and then step through those phases, and I have a step inside where the LLM via a skill file would self-report on what it had done. I'd then write through another one which went through a bunch of, because I use Rails, so a bunch of Rails standards, and see quite explicitly how well it does those Rails standards, plus some personal coding standards, plus some personal expectations. And then I do a bunch of manual testing and run tests against it. all this went through code review. So, yeah, and that was one. That's no parallel. I mean, I might do 2 features at once, right? And then manually sift. I wasn't doing work trees, so I manually sift the work into different buckets. I don't want to fuck about the work trees, so it's just annoying. But yeah, generally speaking, one. No, this coordination bullshit. And even with like one alone, the amount of bad ideas. So it's not the fault is mine. The amount of bad ideas. So that's like a fairly constrained, quite conservative workflow, right? Which is one of sort of a slower, more careful, mostly well-reviewed, short leash, challenged constantly, aka the slowest way to work with an LLM, right? Not many tiers removed from writing the code yourself, right? And I saw a video the other day and someone went, if indie developers or indie companies can't make this work, it was like Mo Bitar, I think his name is. It was like, if these small companies, a handful of people with modern stacks or modern applications that don't have that legacy, right, of bad code decisions and idiosyncratic ideas and stuff, can't make this work, a 10,000 person strong company, they're talking shit, they are lying. And that's the reality of it, right? So that scenario just sort of said, and some other experimentation over the course of 18 months or whatever, is enough to put me off. Because even with that, it's a false sense of security given by when you go, oh, did that right, and you don't see the reference frame drifting out of scope, right? So as more and more successful things come in, and you're reviewing, your reviews, your personal reviews get slightly sloppier, right? Because if you'd written the code, half the stuff you're reviewing, you would not even be reviewing because you would have taken a different approach, right? From the off. So you either guide into approach or you go, well, that's novel. I haven't seen that before, right? I don't know what that is. That way, oh, that's an interesting one. I don't see a problem with it because it might be some syntax you're not familiar with or some, whatever. An approach that it's pulled from somewhere you haven't seen, and from a glance divorced of the context of the rest of the code base, it seems rational, right? And then over the course of a few sessions, you start to notice how those slightly unfamiliar but still seemingly plausible, executions of ideas actually form this very incoherent whole. And because you're one step removed from it, even though you're reviewing all the code, even though you're reviewing most of it, because your reviews get sloppier, because you go, well, that sort of makes sense, and then you start off going, well, and if it's something simple, you can skim it, right? And you might skim it and notice one thing, it's like, well, that's slightly different to how I'd do it. Oh. And because you're producing code at a much faster rate, you spend less time reviewing, right? Because you just naturally do. Don't lie, you are. And and then you start noticing it just by osmosis slips in these shit ideas. Or if you're doing something you're less familiar with and you give it a bit more rope, it'll just fumble it almost every time. So it makes it very hard to see where that burden lies, where that time is. And a lot of the time you're just pushing that down the road, right? You're just kicking the can down the road. And in certain scenarios you can have some pretty massive productivity increases, but they're so circumstantial, and you need to be qualified, and not qualified is the wrong word, but you need to be very aware of the context of what's happening to understand truly if you've made an actual productivity increase or not. And then if you over a longer period for other things, yeah, it will drift, and you look back and you go, I don't recall that even going into my code base, right? Where the fuck did that come from? Because in a response to a question, you might do a review, and in a response, and you might say something like, change these 4 lines, and you don't watch it do it. You look away to your other screen for 5 minutes, right, while it does it. In the meantime, it's scaffolded a whole other constructor or some shit, right? Or in the case of Rails, it would build these little helpers and not tell you about them. And then you go to commit and you go, oh, there's been some changes to... Oh, it must have been you get sloppy. You get sloppy. You get sloppier. And, you start to notice, fuck, this is actually making a mess. Even heavily constrained, it's making a mess. And it's not about being some sort of... prude isn't the right word. People say, do you need to read the code if it works? No, I mean, code... code's ephemeral, right? The working of code is not a binary thing. It's not that simple, right? It's not about whether it works. It's about, do you know what I mean? Like when you say something is fine, fine is temporal, right? Something is fine for a period of time. Oh yeah, how's your son doing? Oh yeah, he's fine. Next week he might break his legs. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not fine forever. Fine's right now. So and if you say like, well, let's just look into this box and oh yeah, it's good in a minute, and you divorce yourself intentionally from the context of how it's in that working condition with a system that can't reason, can't think, can't make decisions. Yes, you have to read the code, because when it doesn't work and you have this growing gap in your understanding of how it goes together, even stuff that you understand, real developers are having this problem, not like just the vibe code people who don't understand fundamentally what they're doing. People who understand how to write these things struggle. I do Rails, man. Like half that shit's like copy paste. It's such a simple framework most of the time, and Ruby's really easy to write. Do you know what I mean? And the methodology within the entire community is keep it as simple as fucking possible. Even then I read some stuff and I go, Christ, I don't know what's going on. And it's like, it tries to be esoteric. And it's like, you know, the maintenance burden of this is a growing thing. So that's enough to put me off kind of effectively forever. With the exception of going back to my original point, big tangent aside, is I think using as Google, if you are very critical of the things you read, right? Double check the things that seem suspect. Don't take its word as gospel. In itself is a huge improvement in productivity. You know, like so. I don't know if it's. Let's just go back to FSL, right? So I'm also fighting against like my little skill atrophy. Oh no, I'm not in. There we go. Oh. Right. Try that again. What? Okay. Thank you. Right, FSL. There we go. Excellent. Yeah, so a couple of things I've not done here before. So I've not done much like command line. Well, I'm shit at shell scripting because I've never done much of it. But I was like, I'm writing a little wrapper thing. And this is just me pissing around, but there's a few of these little things I'm not familiar with, right? So like the inner workings of this thing, it's not documented super well. TTY command, right? It's been around for ages. It's a library for building sort of commands, and same thing with TTY prompt, right? This is like a little, almost like it's called a UI framework for TUIs. It's like probably a little bit overkill, but it builds some like little. So if I go to prompt, so things like it gives you these little multi-selects and stuff, right? Wonderful. But yeah, to get an example of like how to do this isn't actually documented super well, because you're you know that standard thing, you're at the mercy of the person who runs the repo and how well and how clearly they've documented something for it to go in, right? So yeah, using an LLM to say scour the internet and give me an example that I can parse quicker, you know, or answer this question for me, means you get to read less documentation and have the correct answer spat out at you. Again, there's some degree to which where like in my previous experience, I found that using LLMs as like an advanced Google hasn't affected my ability to understand like a library or something. It just means that like when I have when you've got a quick answer, there's something you just got to learn, right? But if you go like, oh, I'm just using this thing, how do I get a multi-select? I know it does it, but I can't be bothered to read the docs. Give me an example of a multi-select. It'll just pull you one out, right? Useful. Very useful. As you dig in, you'll still get that information more naturally, but I think it's actually the only use case scenario where LLMs, I think, actually are unambiguously really useful. And that alone, given, like, if all of this stopped tomorrow, right, and the search bit stayed, that's still a massive increase in productivity, because how much of your day normally, if you're doing software development, is spent Googling shit and digging through Stack Overflow and like, this doesn't work. Oh my god, why doesn't it work? It's this little edge case, this should be working. And then you have to dig through like a whole shitload of like history and Git and like loads of conversation threads to eventually find the one person who mentioned something in 2020 on a very similar situation but not identical situation to the thing that you've got. which means that that's why this thing won't work. And because you found a new case for it, which is similar enough that it's probably the same thing but not guaranteed to be the same thing. You know, that whole sort of like Google detective thing where like I might have a one line change and it might take you 3 hours, right? Just to figure out, oh, just get rid of that. You know? Type scenario. Everyone's done it. If you say you haven't, you're lying, you have. And it's like, so, you know, that, it gets rid of that for the most part. Like, a key watershed moment that made me not realise, I know, but because like LMs do an impression of something that thinks and something with opinions, right? But it isn't. You can expose it, right? So it's there's a comedy special, not a comedy special, like a stand-up special years ago called Dave. There's a guy called Dave Gorman. He's a British comedian. It's Dave Gorman's Google Whack adventure, right? And a Google Whack is a word I think it's fallen out of favour. It's a very early 2000s word of, hang on, wait a second. Hang on. Sorry, sneezing like crazy. A Google Whack basically is a search result in Google which has only one result, right? So you've bamboozled it. You found something esoteric enough, and you can write any sequence of bullshit words into Google and return 1 or 0 results, right? But something meaningful that is only has one point of reference on the internet, and this is from like the early 2000s, right? So obviously this is even more rarer thing now. It was considered rare then, but now obviously it's much rarer, right? Getting a plausible combination of words that result in a single result. I found one. I found a code one, and I was learning Ember. I'm still learning Ember, really. I've not had much chance to use it in anger. I'm going to use it for something I'm going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, I was learning Ember, and there's a very, I can't remember the specifics, but there's a very subtle bug. So in Ember, there's a thing called Ember Data, which is like use JSON API, and it builds like almost like a navigable tree view of your entire data structure. Think of it as like an alternative to GraphQL. It's like a slightly shouty, over-specified JSON output, but it means that you can traverse all that data the way you would like in a tradition, almost like the way you could in a traditional sort of like full stack framework like Rails, right? So there's less manual querying. You can sort of construct queries, and then this concept of async versus non-async relationships. Let's not go into specifics of that. Async doesn't mean what you think it means. It's their version of async was esoteric, weird, and actually really bad. And the answer ended up being, don't use async, right? But there's a subtle bug that's, again, part of the reason why you don't do it, where when you make use of it in a relationship, and it sort of like identifies itself in a bunch of different subtle ways, right? Which is part of the reason why it's bad. But also, there aren't really those sort of those undocumented things that have to be captured in the conversation. You know, that sort of undocumented behavior scenario. And if it's really subtle, there aren't that many conversations on the internet about it. And I remember running into it, and I asked them, I was like, what's this? And then the one I was using, can't remember which one I started with, it might have been Gemini or whatever, gave me a solution that did not work. I was like, okay, cool, fine. So I was like, I can't find anything. I couldn't find anything on the internet. Couldn't Google it. So that came up blank. So I went to a different. I think I went to Claude or something, right, or ChatGPT or one of them, and asked it effectively the same question, and it told me the exact same thing, just phrased very slightly differently, and it didn't work in the same way the other one didn't work. It was exactly the same solution, verbatim. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I asked a third LM. And exactly the same thing again. And no matter what I did, there wasn't just a single question. Each time I poke at the problem with all of them, right? To say, you know, follow-ups of things, like, have you thought about this? Whatever, you know, sort of stuff. Just to try and coax a different answer out of it. in all of those scenarios, I tried 4 totally. I think I did ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and what's the other one? I think it was what the fuck's it called? Kimmy, I think. Which is, I think, also kind of Claude effectively. But like, yeah. And they all came back with the same answer, just phrased ever so slightly differently. Which is very bizarre. Until, and in each one of those scenarios, the solution was the same. The solution didn't work. It had no alternatives to give me, had no further useful information to really push the conversation forward. I had hit a dead end. I had Google whacked the LLM, which can happen. You know, if you pay attention to them, like sometimes they'll get in a situation they don't really know what to do, and they just sort of start talking bollocks because they don't know the way out, but they have to pretend. They have to. The nature of the software means, or the nature of the algorithm means that they can't not link information because it's not thinking or doing anything meaningful. It's just finding the next plausible word in the sequence of words, right? So it'll always come back and it'll always find, this is why it goes around circles and it's sycophantic and whatever, because it has to be by its nature. And one sec. But I found this fascinating. So I carried on Googling and I found it. I found the one Stack Overflow thread which someone asked a very similar question. Someone else posed an answer, and the response from the original poster was, that didn't work. And the response was, the suggestion from the person that didn't work was the same one the LLMs told me. There was only one reference to this problem on the internet. Only one place this information to fix this obscure little bug was publicly available. And that's why none of them could answer it. Because they don't think, they don't reason. And what I did is I went to the Discord, the Ember Discord, fantastic by the way, highly recommended. They are the single nicest development community I've ever encountered. They are phenomenal. Closely followed by Dragon Ruby, full of wall-to-wall legitimately lovely people. And then someone gave me all the context information I needed to fix the problem. There was a one-liner, and I fixed it. And that's what I mean. Undocumented behavior. This thing only exists in a vacuum, right? It exists as like a you have to know type thing, right? You have to have all that context around the nature of this issue to know the answer to the question. You have to speak to someone who knows what they're talking about, who understands how it works. LLMs cannot do that. They never will. And it's like, that's the thing where you can't. So when people say, and that was a big watershed thing. It's like, I wasn't shocked by any of this. I found it fascinating at the time, but it threw into sharp relief the reality of how these systems work. You get to see it laid bare in a way, right? Which is really interesting. That it, because we all know it's effectively just copy pasting, isn't it? But it's like, if you're someone saying I'm going to run multiples of these in parallel and not really monitor, like I've heard anecdotally people saying, oh yeah, we need to also have LLMs do the reviewing and then fixing based off the reviews. I'm like, what? These tools are shit. These tools are so shit. And like, like the thing is, the more novel and the more obscure something gets, the faster they fail, right? So what I'm doing in this stupid little file here, which is not really doing anything interesting, is there's nothing remotely novel about what I'm doing here. I'm just wrapping some commands and I'm sending some shit to a terminal. Nothing exotic, all documented, all referenceable. You can piece together plausible ways to get this all done. But in my other code bases, it's doing plenty of things that are kind of a bit more weird, a bit more esoteric, a bit more unusual. And like there's a thing that goes around a lot of software, like very senior software engineers, I think, when they say, I'm going to hide this line. This is the dumbest shit. Don't know what. I'm just going to delete that. Let's just delete that. Let's get rid of that. That never existed. So yeah. yeah, amongst senior software engineers or very senior software engineers, where they sort of say, if you're, and it's partly true, but they say, if your product doesn't solve a technologically complex problem, then you don't have a product, which is not true. It's more like a drastic oversimplification, right? So plenty of products can exist because they have commercial fit, right? So you can have something technologically stupendous that solves a very complex problem in a very elegant way. If there's no market fit, that product will fail, right? And if there is no, or even things like, I'm a designer by trade, right? If the UX of it is bad, if the usage of it or the cognition for end users of it is bad, it also will fail. It can be technologically fantastic, right? Doesn't guarantee success, doesn't guarantee your product's worth anything. Value is in the eye of the beholder, ultimately, right? But there's this line of like, if you're doing something which, and there's loads of products that do things that aren't at all novel, right? And they live or die by that. Look at Discord, right? Discord functionally doesn't do anything interesting, does it? It's just Slack, but with adverts, right? And like some stream centric thing. It's a packaging exercise, right? And it's a market fit exercise in terms of what they give away for free and access and partnerships and shit like that. The technology behind it is not the interesting part. Technologically, it's not good, really, is it? So, that's not true. But there's a line where like the joke about making like activity trackers and all that sort of stuff. It's true, right? You're not doing anything that they're doing something technologically completely mundane. And yeah, that's where that market fit or that whatever comes in. Look at Superlist is a great example, or look at Wunderlist, the thing that came before it. They're both just task apps. Look at Things. I use Things all the time. Things is a simple, technologically simple application for the most part. Nothing too crazy. You could rewrite most of Things in a few weeks. If you're using an LLM, you could probably do it in a day, right? Or something, a facsimile of it in a day. But the real effort's gone into things like UI polish. The design of it is very coherent, very consistent. There's so many other facets to it that give that thing value. But technologically, yes, it is mundane, right? Those are the things that LLMs are really great at, because there's so much reference material on how to emulate simple ideas, like a to-do list, or like a habit tracker, or like Snake, but yeah, the minute, so in those situations, but like take my main application is ultimately it's project management software, right? It's several degrees removed from a to-do list. Ultimately, there is a place where you can click on a list of things and have their status change, right? However, that's not where the complexity in the application lives. That's not where the thing that makes it potentially saleable lives. It's got loads of features which require some weirder stuff, like the way it handles relationships between tasks. You have bidirectional relationships, but you can pull them in line directly into your current context, or how you handle user permissions and how information flows around the system. The list of jobs it runs, the way it gathers information, the way it makes use of things for reporting is more complex than that. And it has other constraints. It has things like user experience things, like it has a big clipboard system. It has a thing where you can pull up interactive parts of other parts of the interface into other parts of the interface. All these other little features, right? You've got chord binding for keyboard shortcuts and global registration for them, and do you know what I mean? There's like all these little things. There's layers and layers and layers of interdependency in what's a slightly more mature application that has a command palette, right? The command palette has to work with the keyboard shortcut system, which also works with keyboard chords. It needs to be registered globally, but then also you've got all the dependence in terms of how you lay out JavaScript, which runs it, and blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stuff. And there's lots of those decisions around how you do it. That's just one example, right? So those are the things where it's like you have those layers of the extra thing you need to make the product producty. You can have a version of what I've built probably pretty quick, to be honest. Will it be as good? No. Only because I've spent 2 years building it, right? just by virtue of just time and thought and energy, and that's the thing that LLMs can't do for you, right? Like, it's not me a defense of my little application. The point I'm trying to actually make, what I'm trying to make is, it's excellent at mundane, it's excellent at mediocre, and no amount of LLMs would make a product like that better than. Do you know what I mean? You can't vibe your way to something necessarily useful. And if you can vibe your way to something useful, can you vibe it to something maintainable? Right? Tech debt is the biggest thing, and these things generate it at a rate of knots. It's crazy, the rate at which they just pump out shit. And if you say to me with a straight face that my multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation making great use of it, all the development's done with it, then you're just fucking lying. Like, I watched, I didn't like the guy that much, but like, there's a stream I watched about the Claude code leak, right? And it's something like 400,000 lines of TypeScript. And it's like, I thought when I started doing this is not really, you know, this is a wrapper around a CLI, right? But then all the Claude code will be doing is ultimately being a convoluted wrapper that renders some text around an API call, right? It's arguably doing not much more than this single file Ruby script is doing. And I was already like, I'm writing this in Ruby instead of Shell. That's a little bit of a weird abstraction. Fine. I mean, I know it's good at it. Like, Ruby's actually quite nice for this sort of thing, right? But it's like, why would you do that in React? Why would you do that in React? And also, like, in what world does a terminal application need to be 400,000 lines? Like, again, I've built a much more functional project management piece of software. It's something like 60,000 lines, 70,000 lines, right? Before tests. So it's like, again, you write less of the Rails, so it does get a bit lower, but still, how could a terminal application that just ultimately returns a response from an API, words, effectively streams words, be that large? Crazy. And it's because they vibe coded it, and like people who then inspected the code base found out that it was basically just the worst spaghetti, and we spent a decade moving away from it, and it wasn't because of aesthetics. It's not, you know, try and separate this thing of saying, wringing your hands over like, oh, we don't need to read the code. Well, having things not be, they have individual egos and individual like coding styles and desires and stuff like that. But the reason we moved away, the move away from when I started doing web development was still in what I call the PHP spaghetti era, where everything was homespun in PHP 4, right, or whatever. Everything was a mess. Everything was a little snowflake, and it was a maintenance nightmare. My first sort of like paid development job in 2010, 2009. I'm not going to name the brands, but we worked on some moderately well-known companies running chunks of their website. I remember once I suggested maybe, because this is 2010, don't forget, I was like, maybe we should use SVN. And they were like, oh, no, it took too long to set up. I was like, right. So we'd be sat around, like there's three developers, one of them was me. And we sat around a table and we just shout to each other, I'm in, you know, order processing.php, don't come in, you know. And there's a reason why we moved away from that way of working, right? You know, it wasn't that small a company either, shockingly, but yeah, there's a reason why I moved away like that kind of working and that kind of spaghetti. You know, we had like a guy downstairs. There's another business unit as part of the business, and he ran a tighter ship and used Cake PHP. And he was like, "This is the dream," and he was correct. He was entirely correct. He said how easy it was and how straightforward and also maintainable it was. Yeah, and he was correct. And then the entire industry went that way. And like now, they're trying to go back on it, but also saying, like, using the amount of lines of code generated in a day as a metric is like not desirable. Part of the reason why my main little code base is moderately svelte for what it does is because I know that less, like, a friend of mine says this a lot, and I don't think he's originated it, but I say it too, is like, the best code you write is the most maintainable code you write is the stuff you didn't write in the first place. Well, the best code you wrote was not the best code is the code you didn't write in the first place, right? The fewer lines you've got, the better. And there's a guy inside the Ember community, and their sort of metric in the company they work at is to try and be a net negative lines of code per year, and they do a thing every year where they say, I'm not quite at 0 yet. I think like they got as far as doing like 1,000 lines or 5,000 lines, I think, in a year. Yeah, and it's like trying to actively make less code each year. It's admirable. It's the correct thing to do. And meanwhile, we got like Gary Tan, the Y Combinator guy, vibe coding some bullshit. I'm doing like 30,000 lines of code a day. I'm like, why? to what end? To what end? And yeah, like, given let's just turn into an hour rant. I'm gonna get into Kakoune in a minute. Don't worry. But yeah, like, and then you get the other end of it where you've got the financial realities of this stuff. Where I think I've gone cold turkey. So after my recent experiences with the sort of like, the agentic working thing, plus what it's done to like my mind, honestly, that thing of where it makes not just coding, it makes everything less enjoyable. It makes you impatient. It makes and coding, there is some fun to be had with it because you feel very productive, but that's a much less. That's more of a saccharine, bag of sweets kind of fun, versus I've constructed a jigsaw puzzle or a ship in a bottle kind of fun, which is what coding normally is, right? And the ship in the bottle is much more rewarding, isn't it, than eating an entire packet of Haribo and having a tummy ache. And I'm in that tummy ache phase now, right, where it stripped out a lot of the fun. Actually, it turns out it didn't really save me much time anyway, because a lot of the stuff that's done, I need to refactor. In partly because it impacted, and the other failing of mine, which I think, again, if you're being honest with yourself, a lot of people are doing as well, is when you're moving quite quickly, you probably want to implement some stuff that you probably wouldn't have done otherwise, right? You would do something maybe in more of a slapshod way, or you do something early before you finish thinking about it, because you spent, because you defer some of that thinking over. And again, the scenario I was working within, I was actively trying not to defer a lot of thinking, and it was very guided, and even then it's left me with this sort of like hangover, which I really don't like. So I've gone cold turkey now. Like the little Google search, the better Google thing, I'm actually okay with, but yeah, the best code is the code you didn't write, and you don't want to invite a machine into your house which will write 30,000 lines of it for you a day. And the economic realities of it are it's addictive, it panders to you, it lies to you, it can't conceive anything, the reference frame moves out of sync, so eventually it's going to just back you into a corner of bullshit, and you have this big cognition gap between what it should do and what it does, which is a big problem. And then that's before you get to people who don't code, right? That's a much larger problem. There will be products that reach market that will exist, maybe even get popular in the space for a few years, may no longer exist just by virtue of their inability to maintain and iterate on a product, right? Because they vibe coded it, and they can throw more vibes at it, and eventually it will fail and hope that it gets better, or they'll have to get engineers in to rewrite it, but they will have moved too fast and everything will be engineered badly. It's a problem. It's a big problem. And the economics of all of this is starting to come home a little bit now, where it costs so much more. Like, these are all huge loss makers. They all piss money away, and like companies like Google and Microsoft, who I think are ultimately the two biggest benefactors of this entire period, ultimately, maybe to a lesser extent Apple, they're the ones the most to gain from all this, from the actual software, and the safest. They are raising prices and capping things. Like Google train their in-house stuff, and they're not in the big circular financing OpenAI deal as much. That, not even touching any of that. But before all of that, their running costs are moderately low, right? And some of their adoption is amongst the highest, right? And some of their use cases are amongst the best. And they can run a lot of these experiments, and they're extremely cash wealthy in numbers that you can't even conceive of, right? Similar to Microsoft, similar to Apple. And even then, the thing that happened today with GitHub Copilot raising its prices, like, I don't know the factor of how much that got raised by, a fuckload. It's because it's not tenable, right? So if you've got all these people hooked on your supply, standard and shitification, right, where you have, you've got to learn the rate at which you boil them frogs, because that's why you put them in the cold water to start with, right? So, and they're boiling it a little bit too quickly because they kind of have to, because they spent so much fucking money on something that isn't that useful, and they're hoping people are hooked enough. I think it's just also at the time when more and more people, so like the last few days we had, it was the CEO of Sentry. So like if you think of Datadog as being the big one, Sentry's like probably second, right, in terms of like the whole like analytics and security sort of thing, reporting guy piece. Sentry's a big company basically. Him saying openly that like multi-agentic coding is kind of bullshit. And then the other day had like the CEO of Linear, a company that I quite like, but they're also like, I like their product, and they are like some darlings. They've really leaned into the sort of agentic bullshit for Linear, and you can open Linear issues directly into an LLM or whatever now, right? He said the other day something very similar. So you've got people who are benefactors of this saying, guys, this doesn't work, and like senior engineering minds are either saying this is fine because I can make it work for me, which I think also does a lot for perpetuating the idea that these things work properly, because they gloss over the gaps that they fill, right? Like if you are DHH or someone like that, who in your $50 million Malibu mansion, and you go, I'm a good enough software engineer to wield this tool, and the scale of what I'm working with is of sufficient complexity where I can guide it in the right direction often enough to make it do real work. His opinion is going to be positive, but then he's probably not go into much detail about how much of it he is doing, how often he's taking. I mean, he is a little bit, to be fair to him, but people don't read that bit, how often you have to put your hands on the wheel, right? They just go, oh, well, this they go, well-known, talented, rich person says is good, must be good, you know. But yeah, so now like the economic realities of it are coming home. These things cost way too much to run, and if you are heavily reliant on it, if you're already spending quite a lot of money, that's going to go up dramatically because the prices just have to go up. And I think to an extent where a lot of the vibe code people are fucked. I think you've got a degree to which I think local that much problem with local LLMs, to be honest, but they are getting to the point where they're kind of good enough for the crappier stuff. So I think we're hitting on this point where you realise that like the line of how good it needs to be isn't here; it's actually down here somewhere. And actually, this tool costs a fortune to do that, and this tool does that much. Like does that much of that, but for free. It doesn't bode well for an industry that's like, what is it, hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, or whatever, in the whole. And we could have solved world hunger with that. Instead, we've got people, generating videos of Martin Luther King. I don't fucking know. Point is, yeah, someone's got to pay for it. That's why that Sora thing got closed down. That's why I think, yeah, like all the image generation stuff is too expensive. Code generation stuff and general usage is really expensive. They have to reduce those operating costs. And actually, yeah, in terms of results, and like with all of this, with all the massive failure that's incoming with this entire sector, there's still plenty of money there. There's still tons of money. There's still so many use cases that are actually legitimately useful, right? They're just way fewer and further between than anyone wants to admit loudly. Either you're too naive to notice, or you're too invested to admit. So let me lay out a scenario for him. It's going off on an AI right now. But if we've had like sort of 10, 15 years of zero interest rate and what they call, I think it's called like slam economics, where that growth at all costs, right? Grow as fast as you can. Customers come later. Profitability comes later, right? Look, customers come now. Profitability comes later, right? Get big, make money later. That only works in certain economic scenarios, right? And those are gone for general purpose technology. Those days have finished. They finished a few years ago, and the only thing that can maintain that degree of irrationality is AI. So even if you know, right, so even if you, CEO of multinational corporation, know that this thing's bollock, you may not, you may just be an idiot and you know, reading headlines and going, oh, those are facts, let's do, probably the majority, let's be real. You'd have to be smart to be a CEO. But, but then, you know, say if you're aware of the limitations of this, you're aware, I mean, because like, think about it. So many sort of AI initiatives inside businesses are pilots, and most of them don't go anywhere because they generally tend to fail, right? Universal or unilateral replacement of certain human departments with LLMs does not work because they just can't do the work, right? And things like frontline support, actually not too bad, but no fucker wants to speak to a robot. But you know, there's ways to make it useful. Lots of subtle ways to have little ads that, you know, that improve things. It's just a technology, it's just a tool, right? But that's not enough promise. It needs to be revolutionary, because whether you believe it or not, that's the only way you're getting more of that investment cash right now. So you just have to say it even if you don't believe it. So, yeah, good on the CEOs of Linear and Sentry to put their heads above the parapet a little bit and at least mildly say, hey, you know what, this ain't working. Because, you know, people say, oh yeah, you've got to like AI generate all your code or whatever. You do have to read it for it to work forever. Working is temporal, right? It's not a switch you flip. It's not. Everyone thinks of working and not working as binaries. It's not a binary. It's a little fluctuating line of how well something works, which varies over time. Everything is Schrodinger's SAS, right? You never really know. But yeah, well, you mean when it doesn't work, you do know. But you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So once it's massively expensive, I think a lot of these sort of, because also like the pilots get scrapped really quietly. Oh, it was an experiment. Oh, it just, you know, and like, you know, the ones that loudly said, like, look at Duolingo. What was the other one? Was it Salesforce? I can't remember. Like, a couple of companies went, oh, we're going all in. We sacked a fuckload of people and replaced them with AI. It's going to be so good. And quietly, they've not only hired those people back, they've hired back more. This is I go on about these topics all the time, but the consultant problem, right? And like, I'm always very aware of like how certain things in the world are just another thing, but it's like when you take it out of the context of what it is and put it somewhere else, people think it's a different thing, but it's like, no, it's just this, but somewhere else, right? So you look at like big older industries, right? So history tends to repeat itself. History spins in wheels, right? There's little wheels, bigger wheels, but everything sort of, it's the same handfuls of shit that spin around and come back around every once in a while. In like, if you take like military contracting or like government services, like big building projects, you know, like big engineering things with lots of moving parts, right? And lots of money involved and lots of labor involved normally. Let's say you're building the Eurotunnel, right? One of the most ambitious engineering projects in history, building a tunnel under X number of miles underwater between France and England. Crazy cool project. And lots of moving parts, lots of inefficiencies, and also lots of drive. And this sort of macrocosm of what we're seeing in the technology industry right now, because technology is not the only industry. We treat internet technology, at least, we treat as the only industry, but it's not, right? It's intermingled and sort of simpatico with a load of other shit, but it's not the world, right? The world is not the internet. Yeah, and you know, there's a thing that's been a thing for years. That's where this idea of the consultant problem comes in, where some disconnected middle manager will say, well, this is a great idea, let's do this. Some engineer or some, you know, person who's a bit more in the trenches will go, it can't work because of X, Y, and Z reason. They go, not interested. I know better. Let's give it a go, and it either gets trialed, and in the meantime they've made efficiency gain. Efficiency gain is as good as them being able to put on their CV they've made efficiency gain, right? Not an actual tangible gain, because they don't care. Because if someone's out just to make money for themselves, do you care about actually having a line go up on a graph mean something, or have the graph, right? Having the graph in a slideshow deck you've got in a Google Drive somewhere, and you've got it in your CV, and you can write about it on LinkedIn, right? That's the thing that's valuable, right? Because it doesn't actually matter if you've improved something. If you can say something's happened, that's as good as it happening as far as you're concerned, right? So when that's the same MO for people inside those industries. And don't hate the player, hate the game sort of thing to an extent, but they institute something. It could be like a new type of software, a new process. It could be some new hardware, a new unproven thing. It could be a complete and utter, on the face of it, bit of science fiction, like self-driving cars that don't use like Teslas basically, or another one, Elon Musk, like hyperloops. On the face of them, Hyperloop's a fucking awful idea, stupid idea, but you have a big enough headline that says you can do this and it's new technology. People, fuck, like what they call gadget barns, right? Everything where everything basically like the train is the crab of transport, right? Ultimately, but same thing, right? So you have someone say in this big project, let's get this thing in. I think it will work. It doesn't work, and then the people fired off the back of this thing not working normally get hired back at a higher rate than they were fired at to fix the problems the thing that fired them created. The consultant problem. This is happening with all the LLM stuff now. It's starting to happen already. I saw a thing the other day with companies saying we're now hiring junior engineers because we can't waste the tokens on trivial work. Chef's kiss. These tools put constraint and put pressure on the lower end of the workforce, or the beginners in the workforce, by their nature, right? They also threaten, whether legitimately or just with a little, a stick, right? To say to it's basically like saying to senior engineer, we are paying you. Let's say you've got a staff engineer somewhere like Facebook, right? That guy's on $250,000 a year, right? And that's a lot of money to pay anyone to do anything, and they've got 15 of them, right, or 30 of them, or 100 of them. If they can say, yeah, this thing's real good, and there's no threat of this fucking thing actually threatening their job or their abilities. It's not. It just isn't. Even economically, take out all of the sort of human craft element, which is one of the common refrains to this is, no, you're worrying too much on the human craft element of this. It's no. Maintainability, tech debt is the tangible thing, and you don't fix it by throwing more LLMs at it. But you might, and everyone goes, that's the two ones is you're too wedded to the human craft, or but they might, and they're both fucking awful. Because everyone thinks it's some sort of gotcha. Everyone, the internet's always oh, yeah, I've got them. Skill issues, bro. I fucking hate that phrase so much because, not because of it's annoying, because it is annoying, but it's more let's compress an entire conversation into an entire line. It's this sort of weird little mindset where it's that same thing of when you're a kid in the playground and someone just some kid's being a dick, and they just repeat the same line over and over and over, and they're still on the fucking swings and they won't get off. And you're like, get off the fucking swings. Well, that is that. But with grown-ups aren't supposed to do that. Grown-ups are supposed to talk. And it's you can't compress the complexity of all these things into one line or two lines. Where it's maybe they will. That's magical thinking, right? How? If you're a firm believer in something potentially going in a direction, and you believe that strongly enough to defend that thing going in said direction, surely you know how it gets there, right? Right? Because if you don't, or you have an inkling, you're just going, well, it probably will. It's gotten better recently. In what way has it gotten better? Especially if you're a technical person, right? Someone whose job it is to understand how things work, right? You're a maker, right? Anyone, like, not even technical, but if you're someone who makes things, you could be a builder, you could be a bricklayer. The point is, you create things, you make stuff, and you understand mechanics of how those things become. And one thing we all share as people who make stuff is that curiosity and that ability to be quite good at understanding how things have to come together in order to work. But when it comes to this, you've changed your mind. So, like, how do they cross this barrier? How do they become magically AGI, right? This fucking silly bullshit science fiction term, artificial general intelligence, because, like, the main technology of a transformer model, we need that new fundamental technology, right? It's a new branch on the tree of machine learning is what we need, right? We've got two really cool party tricks, so like diffusion and like transformer models, right? That power all of this. They're really good party tricks, and if you throw shitloads of compute at them, because we have shitloads of compute, they can do some really cool shit, right? But within major constraints. That's like saying, like, it, like, LLMs improve in the way you make a blender better, right? Nothing's changed about it. It's still some spinning blades and some in a jug. But if you make it really big, it can blend more food. Like, that's the level of engineering we've got in terms of this. Like, you know, that to massively oversimplify, it's not that simple, of course. But the point is, without that new branch on the tree, there's no route for these things to get better because of the nature of how they work. And just because something's good at something doesn't mean it can't be limited, right? Like, you have entire branches of technology that existed for decades that had huge fundamental flaws. And a lot of the time, like, the better technology doesn't always win, right? There's better solutions for everything. Like, the classic example is like Betamax versus VHS, right? VHS won, but it was the inferior format. Whatever. Like, you don't have to be the best thing to win. You have to be the best thing to persist. In fact, actually, there's other factors that make things successful, right? But part of that is having acceptable concessions on what they do. Right now, for what is being proposed, for what these tools do, the concessions are not acceptable. And then becoming acceptable concessions, they might do. How? Right? How? Tell me. Because right now we're not really making any new massive breakthroughs in the foundations of this. There's loads of other branches of machine learning that exist, but to get back to where we are, and again, if this thing becomes good enough, and we think it's really going to happen, we're going to lower our expectations to a point where it becomes mundane, and lower what we, you know, we're going to meet it in the middle, because, you know, the sort of like the S-curve thing is happening, right? The sort of like the improvement S-curve thing's happening. We're on the curve somewhere. But yeah, they're not going to get magically that much better, and also, if they are, how? And to say, like, to focus too much on, oh, the human craft of code doesn't matter, it's just about whatever, producing more code. Like, well, no, but then again, working is not a binary. Working is a period of time where something works and is bug free, right? It's not a yes or no question. Everyone loves a yes or no answer. It's not a yes or no answer, is it? Like, if you worked on any software for more than 5 minutes, you'll realize it's not a yes or no answer. So your ability to have visibility into a problem, you know, you don't just say, I don't know how this machine works, but it stopped working. I don't know, have you tried turning it on and off? Yeah, we've done that, run out of options. You call someone who fucking knows, right? And the more complex that is, you know, like, if you've got a really expensive machine, let's say you've bought, I don't know, like, you have bought a nuclear reactor, right? And you've been told which buttons to press, and you know, you can drive it all well and good. You haven't engineered it, but you can drive it pretty good. You don't know how it actually works, right? You don't need to. The nerds have figured that one out for you. But when you're the nerds, and you've given up your ability to understand how the nuclear reactor works, and when it fucking breaks, who do you call, right? Because it can't just work forever. There's the engineering in place that goes in there, and, like, you know, with this, when you give away that insight and you give away that knowledge of the interior workings of these code bases, that's a major problem. So that negates that. I mean, I'm not talking about the human craft of code. I don't think there's a problem letting these things even really like do. Like I did a CSS thing, right? It's I might as well go into the actual meats. It's not that interesting, but I'll tell you anyway. There's a problem in Rails where Ruby's a slow language. It just is. It's similar to Python. It's a bit faster than Python, but bottom tier for speed, right? It's very dynamic. It does. I mean, like when we say slow, I don't mean slow. There's another thing people exaggerate. Like it's fine most of the time, but if you have a complex UI, the real moral of the story is don't use Rails front end for appy things. Just use React or Vue or whatever you want to use. But yeah, there's this memory overhead, right? So I've built a little pseudo framework because with Tailwind, basically I have to produce an inordinate amount of markup given the way that Rails renders front end. There's much more markup than there should be, and a weird bottleneck I've run into in an application is the size of the DOM, right? Because you're limiting your ability to, you can't subdivide a Rails front end as well as you can inside JavaScript because there's a memory overhead, right? And there's the method which renders these partials is slow, so you can't do it too much. So there's a thing called Vue component, which is kind of like a more modern style component system, but again that has a memory allocation overhead. So unless you're doing significant inside one of those, you can't just nest those infinitely because they're still quite expensive. They're cheaper and faster, but actually a lot of the time, if they're not doing anything really meaty, the cost of memory allocation is such that it actually ends up not being worth doing. And I've been at the sharp end of this sword. Basically, if you're building something which needs an SPA, use an SPA. That's the biggest mistake I've made. Talking earlier about the best engineering things, that's a massive fuck up on my part. A big fuck off problem I need to solve. But so I used vanilla, what you expected to in modern Rails. Despite my apprehension, I went, let's give this a go. And by the time I was like, I skirted around I'm getting to the point of no return with this. What should I do? And for some reason, my head was screaming, just stop now. Do it in Vue. Stop now. Do it in Vue. And I went, I'll give it a go with Hotwire more. And I crossed that line and very quickly regretted it. But by the time I regretted it, I was already apprehensive. It was too late. And it became a big problem. And now I have to deal with it now. Anyway, bottom line is, it's a thing. So I wrote a little CSS thing which uses, because Tailwind's obviously lots of markup. So I need to reduce that amount of markup, but I wanted a lot of the functionality of Tailwind. So there wasn't anything that quite did that, so I wrote my own, right? Which reduced the amount of markup required for it, but you get a lot of the features of Tailwind. It ends up being less litter, but a lot of the same ergonomics, which I will release soon. But yeah, it's called Crayon. Basically, it's like a little, it's not really a framework, it's like a little utility toolkit, I guess, for CSS. It uses Sass, very popular, very fancy. So everyone loves. I mean, Sass is great. To be fair, I've not used Sass in ages. But anyway, there's with doing that, there's lots of utility classes that get generated, right? Similar to Tailwind, and there's lots of boilerplate to write. There's reams of it, and the actual core of that thing I wrote in 2 train journeys. I went to visit my mum, and I wrote half of it on the way there and half on the way back, and I was effectively done. But I had to get some more of my examples out the door. And you bet your sweet ass I use an LLM to boilerplate that shit, because it's simple as fuck. It's it's an incredibly simple little thing I've written, and it's not even like, it's not a major tool. It's not revolutionary or anything. It's just not bad, and it's going to work, and it solves a problem for me, right? Temporarily solves a problem for me, but the amount of effort put into it is commensurate to whatever. Turns out I quite like it, so I'm going to carry on using it anyway. But that's whatever. It just isn't that hard. So yeah, it's pretty. But yeah, like I'll just show you actually exactly what I've done. So let's just quit that. Crayon. Okay, so let's just look. I mean, it's a handful of files, right? Ooh. Yeah. So yeah, things like, what's a good example of this? Let's go into, it's probably Flex. Have a look. 125 lines, right? But then I've got, so it replicates part of, so it does, the bottom line of this, what it does is it replicates a degree of Tailwind as utility classes, but not all of it. Right? There's like it's similar to what I was saying earlier with Fossil. It's one of these things with like and it's opinionated, right? It's got a philosophical, it's got a philosophy to it as a little product, where it's like the thing that makes Tailwind awesome is centralization of the things that matter. So versus inline CSS, you get to centralize loads of properties, so things like spacing, colors, whatever, and also you get a degree of immediacy under your fingers to get stuff done. Like prototyping in Tailwind is phenomenal. You're so productive, it's so quick, and once you know it, it's great. But also Tailwind on the downside is a one-to-one replication of the entirety of CSS, and then after a little while your number of utility classes grows pretty exponential, and you like there's this thing of saying, and I'm a big fan of Tailwind. Like, it's not saying I love Tailwind, but like there's a point at which where it becomes like a soup, and you do this thing. I do it all the time where I start to use the more esoteric parts of Tailwind, but like doing more than the basics. So 9 times out of 10, you're just flexing paddings, whatever. When you do something more exotic than that, you know the CSS, but you have to go into the Tailwind docs, read the docs to see what they've renamed a bunch of stuff to make it a utility class that represents a single CSS property, right? And you're like, and I used to get to a point where like, why am I doing this? And paired that with plus the Rails thing, it's like I can't subdivide this into loads of individual very small components anymore, because there's the overhead of doing that, because Rails is very memory inefficient, I'd say. So it became a problem. And also, yeah, you've got this thing where you've got longer markup, and that thing that people don't like about Tailwind that I don't mind as much as that thing of the litter in your front end, it becomes a problem, right? But anyway, yeah, you bet your sweet ass. I replicate part of the Tailwind experience. So the basic, the lines are kind of almost arbitrary, but they make sense. I mean, I need people to start using this to give me a better idea of what they want to see. But yeah, so basically it's some utility classes, quite a lot of utility classes, but not all of them. And then a bunch of mixins and a bunch of functions for those mixins. So I just exposed the functions that power the mixins publicly, so you can use all the functions that exist internally. There's not many, and a bunch of mixins. So when you do your basic layout in inline, Tailwind, whatever, and then you've got a bunch of mixin examples for other stuff. If that makes sense. So do I have an example in here still, or did I get rid of it? I think. I think I killed that off my example file. But yeah, it's a mismatch. So it's a mix. So the idea is you have so if you do scope CSS, you scope CSS is like, people go, that's a thing. Like modules and scope CSS solve the same problem as Tailwind. They kind of do, but Tailwind's got this thing of like sometimes a centralization of certain things. So that's one of the arbitrary, not the semi-arbitrary lines in Crayon is. If it's something where its properties are centralized, it's available as a utility class. If it's something that is just a property that fits outside of that arbitrary rule set, it's not, with the exception of things like your basic layout. So it covers flex, grid, padding, margins, negative margins, alignment. The basics of laying out stuff are all available. As well as like background color, text scale, text whatever. I'm going to config. Get rid of that. It's just this, right? So you've got another config file. You can import this file in. Modern slash is actually pretty cool. But yeah, you can import in all of these. These just maps that power things. It's very much like Tailwind, right? But the idea is, if in doubt, you just use the same scale. If you come into here, where is it? You can just reference these directly as well. So you can. Let me just quickly. I'll get a thing. One sec. Oh, hello again. So yeah, here's my work in progress docs for this. The only thing is, it's finished. I just need, well, it can have, obviously I've always have more stuff, but it's good enough for now. And this is my work in progress docs. I've got a docs. I need to finish that actually. The actual docs themselves just live in like a little like VPress thing. Yeah, so this is like the sort of like going all over the place, not really doing anything today, but it's fine. So great. So what's missing is this. So this is that sort of, these are the biggest drivers of, I think, mess in Tailwind are things like hover states and then inline breakpoint stuff. So a lot of it is container queries. Container queries are easy to write, you know. But if you're using like fixed viewports, then you're doing this a lot. And then you've got like all these little edge case scenarios, and these really build up. So I do it like this. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do a load of this in line, right? So what gets covered is layout, display, colors, typography, and basic aesthetics. So borders, radius. Effectively, if anything's powered by a numbered scale, it's there. If it isn't, it's not. Apart from these things, which sounds like arbitrary, and it is ultimately. But there's a rationale to it. Again, not necessarily perfect. So look at some sample crayon code, right? This is like not using the correct format. How do I do this again? Let's just do, is there SAS here? Let's just say SAS, it's fine. There we go. Right, yeah, so you import Crayon, because this is modern SAS is like this, is pretty nice, it's not as magical as it used to be. And then, yeah, you can use one of the functions. So you go into function directory or this, you can use the actual value. So you just do Crayon, color, and it's just an array, and you pick out blue 500 from the array, right? And then same thing with, yeah, so Crayon hover, Crayon dark, Crayon screen is a function, and then you just pass in, no, sorry, it's not a function, it's a scale again, and you pass in a screen size, right? And then you set the width. Great, so it's a mixture of plain CSS, and the rule is you should probably just use scope CSS, right? But you're still centralizing, so you don't have that full scope CSS problem where it's just inline CSS. It's still centralized in the same way, in the very similar way to Tailwind, right? And a bunch of utility things. So there we go. Color, you can do color white, but you can also include BG, brand, size, 12, right? So all of these properties all have scales attached to them. And then we've got dark mode here, background color equals Crayon color red 500, right? Or size XL, and you can then like see at this size, these are all the things. So you can do, instead of writing like in Tailwind, you'd be like, yeah, medium BG red 500, medium whatever. You can then centralize these inside a single nested thing, which again makes it a little more terse, I think. Yeah, the experience of writing Crayon is actually pretty nice, to be honest. It's better than I expected, because again it was to reduce the amount of markup in the front end in Rails, but actually it's quite fun to write and quite easy to get your head around. It's my section on Tailwind being awesome, but so yeah, here's my example of this is all work in progress. Don't read this too hard, but yeah. Yeah, this is pulled directly from, this is not like a particularly bad example, pulled directly from Flowbyte, so a popular sort of Tailwind component library thing. And yeah, white, BG brand, box border, border transparent, hover, BG brand strong, focus, ring 4, focus, you know, and this is not that bad. This is quite a mundane example, actually. This is not an extreme one, but look out, it's pretty verbose. I should probably put in the equivalent, because like the biggest thing that Tailwind solves really is, what was that? Oh, fun. Lovely. Yeah, so the biggest thing that Tailwind probably solves is that semantics thing, right? So the reason why I say use this in scope CSS is because, and the biggest problem with again, this goes back to people argue this, and in my opinion is pretty strongly in one particular camp, is like when it comes to CSS, the problem with CSS is you lose the first C with Tailwind, but the first C, yeah, you lose the C with Tailwind, but what you get in exchange is not having to maintain the semantics, right? So when you're working specifically with component systems, if you're not doing components, doesn't matter as much. But in components, they are the semantics. They are the main building blocks of an application. The front end of an application are those components, right? And they're functional blocks. So when you write a sidecar to that, which is your CSS classes, which have to somewhat stay in sync, a component can have many different states, right? Loads of different view states. It can do multiple things. It can be put into, a component can do quite a lot, but a component is functional and CSS is not, right? And that's the important thing. CSS is a child. It's a child of that component. It's the more important semantic unit is that component, and by maintaining two layered semantics next to each other, they will drift in and out of over time. And that's how you end up with that sort of like, I think I've got an example in here, that sort of like those classes you always end up with, which is like, box, customer, or you can do it BEM style, right? Box, customer, confirmation, not registered. You know what I mean? Like you end up in this sort of situation, right? Those crazy things. And Tailwind removes that, right? Because you just have those semantics live in one place rather than two, so they fall out of sync. And weirdly, large CSS things become quite difficult to unpick, right? Which is why Tailwind became so popular. That's the main thing it does. So why I say you don't have to, with Crayon, you don't have to. You could just do same with Tailwind, right? You can use @apply if you want. Loads of people do. You probably shouldn't. This is like @apply but with superpowers, basically, right? And it says the way you should probably use it, but you are a grown up, but the way you should probably use it is scoped, because then you get all of the benefits of that @apply thing, but the @apply does a lot more than just stack up a bunch of utility classes. They're functions, right? So Sass is a language after all. It's not just layout. So you can each little Sass thing, each mixin is effectively like a function, right? Or well, not really, but you know what I mean. Like every time you include something, it's you can use it like a function. So so yeah, there's some install docs. This is way too verbose. I need to in the spirit of things, yeah. So things like padding, this works the same way. Sizes works the same way. Colors works the same way. You can also default imports the Tailwind palette, but you can use your own, obviously, as well. Typography, one thing that's missing right now actually is a thing that I do quite a lot, which there's no formal support for in Tailwind, but I'd like to add formal support for in Crayon because I use it, is multi-themes. When you have a theme switcher, so you have different color themes and you switch between them, right? Basically you append a thing to, you have a prefix inside, you have like a prefix inside all your classes, right? Where they differ from standard, and you have like a thing attached to the HTML tag or to the body tag which names the theme, right? So if it's red or green, the theme. I use this in a product, and there's some informal workflows that exist in Tailwind, which got made worse with Tailwind 4. And I had formal support for that in Crayon, but it doesn't exist yet, because I've not thought about the right way to do it yet. But I'll think about it. But yeah, okay. Look at functions. So here's another one. So we've got Crayon size. That is just, same thing as writing whatever. So you can either write it this way, or you can just pull in a utility class here if you want as well. Up to you. It's fine. Color space conversion. Yeah. So here's one of the big offenders for me. Where is it? This should be. Oh no, it's this one. This is supposed to be CSS. There we go. Excellent. So yeah, we've got state in dark mode. So your hover, your focus, your active. Instead of repeating this over and over and over again, there's the other tier of Tailwind where you've got things like groups and other such things, and doing nths and whatever. There's CSS selectors are better. They just are. And they're more powerful and whatever. So it's like the bottom line is use the good bits of CSS, and then the bits where they just need to be more convenient, just let them be more convenient. It's not rocket science. So this bends always a little bit. So things like, screen's an interesting one, right? So Yeah, so we go, include crayon, screen, MD. So instead of doing this over and over again, you can just do this once, and then you get to centralize all of these things. And you can either write it CSS styley, or do you know what I mean? You can pull, because these also exist so they exist as every single value exists as a utility class, a CSS variable, and as their just direct reference, right? So you can write this however you want. It's not as consistent as Tailwind, which I don't think is necessarily a problem. Again, if CSS was complicated, that would be a problem, but CSS is not that hard. And what you do nine times out of 10, all day in and day out, is not that difficult. And not that crazy. Most of it isn't that exotic. So it's fine. So yeah, same as Tailwind, yeah. CSS variables, utility classes, or you can write it like this. Things like hover, focus, and active states. Again, you can just have multiple properties in one rather than having to write focus 13 times over in line. This is just at the bottom of the same page, use a couple of class names, and then because it's scoped. So the names of the semantics of the names of the things inside that view do not matter, right? And you can still dynamically add stuff because it's still got utility classes. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's cool. Yeah, so I need to write some more stuff here. Yeah, so screen. So you can you have screen and screen, so you can set multiple different breakpoints at the same time. There's also container, so we can do container queries like this and set the container bounds, and then just do a property inside it. We also got responsive visibility, so show from, hide from, show until, and hide until. So if you've got elements that show and hide at various breakpoints, you can manage those in one-liners. There's also range mix-ins, right? Which I did not think I'd like these, but actually I really do. So if you don't want to centralize your... Again, you don't have to use any of this, but if you don't want to do what we did up here and say... where is it? And say... Yeah, screen medium. You can do it on an individual property, right? So you can say... Let's just put some syntax high on here. Let's do that again. CSS. Yeah, so we can just say, well, this hero image, yeah, p range, so just property name / hyphen range, and then default, and then you just do medium, large, whatever, and you can set the sizes in their range and make it a one-liner instead. It's fun. So there you go. So there's my example there. Perfect. So yeah, p range, py. This is all the ranges available. So gap, margin, whatever. So anywhere there's a number-based thing. I need to probably extend this out to text, I guess. I don't think I do text size for range because it'll be a bit verbose. But again, people need to start using this for me to figure out what to do with it next. Yeah, width range, height range, grid, border. I do text range. Huh. Yep. Scope. This is native CSS now. Scope. It's great. It's fine. CSS variables, yeah, so all the stuff is available as variables. Typography. Then down here, there's some stuff. Custom media queries. I'm going to delete this entire section. So custom media queries do exist, but you have to use a post CSS thing to make it work, because it's not supported anyway yet. But actually, all the features of Sass eventually will be supported in CSS natively, but they aren't yet. And when they are, you bet your sweet ass I'll convert this to regular CSS. But also, actually, the syntax of Sass is nicer, I think, I find, than a lot of the sort of logical CSS stuff. Anyway. I'm going to delete this entire section. I'm not going to go into... I'm going to basically just do for now. I'll do a mention, say, yeah, you can use custom media queries where it works, but you're on your own. Feature reference. So, hang on, wait. So yeah, I did generate a bunch of these docs with. So here's another thing actually, where this is another mixed up. This is before my cold turkeying as well. But yeah, I did so I didn't actually write anything functional, but the boilerplate of like a lot of these. Yeah, I generated that shit with a... Oh, fuck. I generated some of this shit with an LM because it's just, like, long, isn't it? And there's nothing it can fuck up, so it's fine. Yeah, so... But yeah, also, I generated a bunch of docs. And this is why it's taking me so long to put it out, because these docs... This has, like, been edited down heavily, but the LLM-generated version of the docs was fucking atrocious. to be honest. And this is quite a long document because there's quite a lot of stuff in it, but I need to do a lot of editing. This is why it's taking me so long. It'll come out at some point when I can be bothered to finish off the docs, basically, because it works. It's there. I just need to make sure people can. It's already available, but it's just not very. The full docs aren't there, and you look at it and go, I don't know what this is. I have a couple of people trying it out, but nothing crazy. So where are we? We should have a section here. Here we go. Is this my section? There's some other fun stuff. So these are less useful. It's got a bunch of these sort of like bigger, what I call composition helpers, which are very much circumstantial and more like, again, this is not a framework where you're supposed to leverage anything. It's just a bunch of stuff that you can use, right? It's not a replacement for Tailwind. It's not really intended to be a competitive Tailwind either. It's just a different thing. So, yeah, we've got fluid. So if you've come across... It's this, basically. It's literally this. This is their algorithm, right? To do this... yeah, the scaly boy to have the fluid scales. Oh, wrong place. It's quite a fun take on that. So you can do... Where's my... No... There you go. CSS. Yeah. So yeah, you do yeah, from 2, right? So your base size to 4XL, right, or whatever your that's these are your text sizes. And it turns into that, right? So padding from 2, right? So across your range of viewport, you just set what it's supposed to do, and it will just do it. It's really fun. Another thing as well is, where are we? Customing. So yeah, composition mixins. Here we go. Although really, yeah, I might move the whole fluid section into composition mixins because it is the same. So composition mixins are just shorthand. Again, I wrote these to use them because I was like, while I was building this. So yeah, like I wrote most of it in 2 train journeys and used it for a few weeks, and then made a second round of new shit. And these composition mixins came out of that because I was like, oh, how minimal. Because actually the ergonomics of Crane are actually quite nice. Auto completes mix. There's it's all got so it's all should all be SAS docked up. I think I've done. Have I not done all of it? Hang on. Composition. There we go. Yeah. So this right here is, I don't know. It's a thing until a few weeks ago. SAS dock. So yeah, it does what it says on the tin. There is a there's an LSP called Some SAS, and it can read this to give you some nice little hinty boys. I don't think it works in Kakoune. We can find out. Yeah, so you got VStack stack, and that's just basically stack is just a alias of VStack. So I've written that. So yeah, you can just do a stack, which is basically, you can see what it does. It's just a vertical flex, right, with a gap. So you provide it a gap, and it just makes a flex for you in a one-liner. It's quite fun. So there you go. Include VStack 4, and then we've got VStack. We've got Haystack or HStack, which is the same but horizontal, so flex direction row. We've got Cluster, which is basically just like so I don't know whether the name Cluster came from it. This was a suggestion from a different framework, I think. I don't like it, but it's basically a grid, right? I can't call it grid, but it's effectively a grid. But it's not a grid. It's used with it's a flex. So yeah, the most important one ever, which my favorite comment I've ever put in anything. The solution to the hardest problem developers face: centering a div. The hardest thing you will ever learn how to do. It's the most difficult thing ever. But you can just do center, or you can center X or center Y. So you can do both axes or Y or X only. I might do a little. I could do a little. Yeah, I could do a little thing. Yeah, I think. Do I? Yeah, I think because most of the time you don't want to center. Do you? I don't know. I might just do like center Y, center X as well, separate ones. That might be a good idea. Yeah, maybe I might do, just so you can not have to pass it in, and then we can also have. Have I got this as a? that's another question actually. Which when more people start using this is, do I? So I had some stuff for a little while where, for example, I was doing this. So you had like P2, right? Whatever, right? Or P3. But I had the version which was like that, and also I had a thing previously where it would flex row. I removed flex to manually. So I had the thing where like I've reeled it back now, but it was like at one point using the same words as Tailwind, but it wasn't the same function. So I had things like you could just do like row, right, and it would infer a flex row for you. That I have to write flex row. I was like, let's make it more succinct, right? Let's make it shorter. And I reeled back on all that because, like, not only am I personally comfortable with writing Tailwind, but a lot of other people are as well. If it's sort of like subtly different, it's kind of shit. Or things like this still exists actually. You can just do bold, right? So there it is, semi-bold and extra bold. So you can just do bold as an option. So you don't have to do text bold if it's inside a text. So if it's inside a P and you just do bold, it'll just know that it's inside. It's simple shit, right? If you're going to typography, what? There we go. Yeah. So utilities, and yeah. So H1 through 6, PA span, lead button, label, whatever, all the things that could be text, and then yeah, you can just you can just inside here you can just do all the things and it'll just infer it all, apart from font family. But yeah, you can just do all of this without having to manually say font. But I think it's both, right? So you can say, yeah, because we've got both. We've got font family, we've got, you know, whatever. Actually no, I do have these as utilities as well, actually. Or do I? Did I rip that out? Why would I have done that? Oh no, here we go. Yeah, text, font. Yeah, here we go. So I have done this. I have done it. I didn't rip those out. Cool. Yeah, so that's the only place where there's that concession. So you can just, but then that doesn't actually break anything. So if you just forget, so I left that one because it's like it's an okay concession to have it. So if you just forget and just write bold instead of font bold, if it's inside a text type element, it will apply the class anyway, right? But yeah, I diverged further from Tailwind for a little while, and we rolled it back. Back again. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah. Previously, I diverged quite. I sort of like split from the Tailwind thing and doing anything quite far, but I reeled it back a little bit. But then, yeah, some of the So going back to some of these, so some of the composition stuff is not as it's not as useful as I originally thought it was, but other people might like it, right? So things like palette, which was a really fun little experiment. I had such a laugh doing this. Which would be like this, right? So you could do multiple colors. So if you've got an element which has a bunch of colors on it, instead of writing a bunch of different classes, you can just do this. IRL, it's not that useful. It's actually kind of shit. But you can say, yeah, if you're doing multiple colors, you can say, well, red, and then it's 100 from there, 900 from there. This is probably one of the worst ones, actually. I might get rid of it. Box is interesting. So box is basically like, give me a div, right? So basically you have a box, you set its mark, you can basically set padding, border radius, border color, all in one go, and background color. So yeah, we can say the BG of this box is white, the border is this, and it's rounded and it's got this much padding in it, right? But you don't get to, that's it. It's like for basic divs. It's kind of interesting, weirdly more useful than I expected, but also not super useful. So the composition stuff's kind of like a bit of a mixed bag, but it is there. Really, I think it's fluid in here, isn't it? Like fluid. Oh, I can't spell fluid. Fluid's not in here. So where is fluid? What file is this in? This is in mixins. Oh, it should probably be. It should probably be in. I think it should probably be in composition, really. But mixins is a little bit of a dud file. So yeah, again, this is something I've written for myself. So it's not the tidiest thing in the world. It's all right. It's not crazy. Yeah, requires post-CSS custom media pipeline for browser support. Probably not worth using anytime soon. Yeah, screens. I should probably break these down a little more. Screens. Yeah, screens, containers not that useful because you can't set a container name. But I mean, yeah, you can, but like it, you know, it's this I might actually. Oh, I don't know. I might get rid of this because it's one of those ones that's like actually. So the sort of like the ideological rules of Crown sort of like yeah, if it ain't again, it's inconsistent, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just use CSS for certain stuff, whatever. But also this kind of gets a little bit close to being not useful at all. Similar, really. If I go back to the where are we? A lot of the composition stuff sort of bends those rules. Vertical stack. I mean, these ones here, cluster the stacks. They are actually quite useful. Div centering is actually surprisingly useful. From this point downwards, though, it's like, yeah, you could probably get rid of most of that and then not really lose out. But again, I'll like. I feel like it sounds really dumb to beat. I don't know. I mean, you have to beta it. Do you? You can just sort of like. Yeah, you could just sort of like get feedback and then adjust from there. I think like a lot of people will or won't use this stuff. I'm not sure. Maybe it's better to leave it out. I would, if people use it, I want to get some opinion from some people first, I think. But yeah, that's Crayon. Needs finishing the documentation. I'm going to probably before this reach out to a couple of mates, give them one-on-ones and say, could you have a go at this for me and give me some feedback? So maybe a couple of front-end devs. Actually, I've got an idea for a dev I want to do that with. Yeah. Probably think some more. But yeah. So I have, I'll be back in 1 minute and I've got 15 minutes and I've got to go. Back in a sec. I have cheese. Okay, so I'll tell you that. I have some cheese. I love cheese. Okay. So. No, so that's most of the story with the crown. So. Okay. So, just before I go, I've just talked bollocks for 3 hours. It's fine. But yeah, I'm going to be putting together a video on my thoughts about Kakoune. I've got a recorded version of what I started out this this stream with on Fossil. I might redo it. I don't know. I'm not entirely happy with it. It's the same talking points at the beginning. So if you zoom back to the beginning of the stream, all the same talking points, just a little more succinct. It's about 30 minutes, the video. Talking about Kakoune, I wouldn't mind, Fossil, I wouldn't mind trimming it down to about 20 minutes. I think it's probably the right amount of time to do that in. So I might have another crack at that. So this stream sort of slightly practice for those two videos. It's just good to talk myself through it, like almost like, I can't do notes, it's really weird. I have to talk myself through it to get the talking points in my head embedded enough so I can repeatedly talk about it, and each take has to be unique, otherwise I can't deliver words to people. I know, I'm weird. So I'm doing a similar thing with Kakoune. Had a go at writing a video on this already, so the TLDR, I've got 10 minutes. The TLDR of Kakoune is basically, I really like it. So I think basically the video topics are going to be effectively what the whys of it, because if you haven't used Kakoune, it's really, really good. It's again, it's one of the sort of critically underrated pieces of software, which is not going to be for everyone. But I found the sort of like when I moved, so I, as part of my de-shitification or de-evilization, I said to myself a while ago, I needed to move to an open source editor of some description. And I thought, I'll have a go at Vim. I had like a little bit of experience, not really, but like enough experience with Vim bindings to be able to sort of get around. It's like, I'll learn Vim better, and I'll just use NeoVim, right? As you do. I've gone hyped about it. And I found the motions quite fun, and then I tried using NeoVim, and it was a nightmare, basically. So because it's the amount of muscle memory required for it, I found it wasn't going in with nothing. At one point I said, I've got to learn some motions because I got caught short SSHing into a machine one time that didn't have nano on it. So what's that? Crazy. Big plane. Yeah, so that bit of Vim motions. Starting using Vim or NeoVim in anger, had a really bad time, because I wasn't that fast with the motions, which is to be expected. But I wasn't going completely from zero, but it was still slower than I expected. And worse than that still was with the distros. It's like Lazy, NVim, MVChad, that sort of thing. I was using Lazy, and you think it'd solve your problems because obviously there's a lot of configuration in Vim. That whole joke of Vim users spend more time with their config than they do writing code, that I'm certain is true, and I found it nightmarish. And I found that Lazy is one of those things where it's like it was almost there, it's not quite polished and not quite laid out how you want, and then when you say I want to make a minor change to something in Lazy, it's kind of like it's that sort of like, it's very much that Linux distro type mentality of here's what you've got, and actually to pull it apart is in and of itself a massive reading exercise, because it leverages loads of packages, loads of plugins, and loads of like infrastructure. The documentation isn't amazing, and when you document technical things, right, there's always a tone to it, so you can't just like have something technical and just make it a one-fits-all thing. You have to try and find like an audience, right? You're the writer assuming that someone knows nothing or knows something. You have to make some degree of assumption of the audience you're talking to get a right pace and the more technical it is, the more prerequisites they have to understand to make something work, right? Just like you can't talk about, you wouldn't, if you were learning React, you'd probably not have to tell people the fundamentals of JavaScript, right? Because you're going to assume that they know, and they kind of have to. It's a prerequisite. And when it comes to like packages on packages, there's loads of prerequisites in understanding Vim configuration that I didn't have in order to make changes inside LazyM Vim. And to go through that meant through going layers of different plugins and little miniature architectures that have emerged over the years. It's basically everything's a rabbit hole, and it kind of actually made the problem of editing making this editor what you want it to be worse. And it pissed me off, and I was like, no, this amount of config hell is bullshit. Don't like it. And again, the motions weren't natural. They felt natural to me, so I went and used Helix for ages, last 18 months or so. Originally out of curiosity, and then I just sort of fell in love with it. The motions, because not only is Helix, the motions are Kakoune motions, right? They just are. So Helix is effectively just Kakoune, but with more stuff built in, because Kakoune has nothing built in. Spoilers. And the visual mode from Vim, which Kakoune does not have, and more on that in a bit. But like if you aren't familiar, the actions are reversed. It's verb selection rather than selection verb. So you can, like in Vim, you can do like 2E or like 2W, which you can do here as well. But inside Kakoune and Helix, if you press B, E, W, whatever, they make selections. And then you act upon that selection. So instead of like, if I want to delete these two words, right, instead of going up to here and pressing D2W, I just make a selection and press D, right? So that's the basics of it, right? Like you get to see what you're about to do before you do it, and also Helix makes them really discoverable because there's like a very popular plugin for NeoVim called WitchKey, which has a little pop-up down here, which when you press one key, it tells you the options available underneath it, right? And Helix has that out of the box. So Helix is like very much a development environment in a box. It's like a really good text editor. Things like it's built around tree sitter and LSPs right in the core of it. So if you install an LSP, it just starts working. You can navigate through like files via tree sitter. So like it's got all of these awesome traversal skills. It's fantastic, and it's got it's got most of what you need built in. But when you hit a point where it's got something you don't want built in, you're kind of on your own because there's no plugin system, right? And that's sort of the biggest Achilles heel. It's on its way. It is coming, but they haven't got a plugin system available yet. It does exist as a branch that's been out there for a few years now, which is quite mature, which has a plugin system. That was quite contentious in Helix land because that plugin system is something called Steel, which is a Lisp. So Helix is written in Rust, because of course it is. And someone said instead of doing a language for a plugin system, something like Lua, or a language people know, they did it in Lisp, which people don't know, and most people don't like. And it's a really odd choice. If you're a what's it called again? Emacs person, I guess you'll love it, but they're all in retirement now, aren't they? So I'm joking. No, but it was an odd choice, and also it's not ready yet. It's not released, so it's like if you hit a thing, there's a lot you can do with it, and it fits in some of like the similar to what I'm talking about now. Maybe I just like opinionated software, or but the same thing with Kakoune has like some opinions, right, about how it's supposed to work. So that was one choice. Is it's got a lot of stuff built in, but if you don't have it, you can still do a lot because you can pipe things out because it's very Unix, so you can pipe things out and return stuff, whatever. But yeah, if it's not there, you're not going to get it because there's no plugin system. Kakoune's different in a way, because the motion system's the same, but there's three key things that make it very different from Helix, right? All of them kind of make it better than Helix, in my opinion, but in some ways kind of worse. There's some other parts that aren't as good. So Kakoune is, unlike Helix, which is like a quite fully featured sort of text editor with things like diagnostics and Git gutters built in, and file pickers and all sort of stuff. It's quite full featured, quite nice. It's like mostly on par with like a lazy mvim sort of level of thing, right? For the most part. There's some things better than Vim does, NeoVim does. This does nothing. It's just a text editor. The motions are the same. They're literally identical, with one key difference, which at first sounds weird, but actually kicks the shit out of what you get in Helix. If I just open up Helix by side, right? We'll grab this entire. It's not the best file, I guess, but whatever. Well, actually, we're in the same thing, so we can just do, what file are we in? We are in Flex. So this is Helix on the right and Kakoune on the left. Let's just go to the top of the file in both regards. There we go, top of the file, right? Helix on the right, Kakoune on the left, right? And the main difference in terms of this is the motions are the same, right? This I've added myself, but yeah, the motions are the same. But if in the thing that Helix brings to the table, which is from Vim, is if I want to select 2 words, right, I do V to get into like a visual mode, basically select mode, and then I can sort of just do E, right, and then it adds to the selection. Press escape and I've got my selection, right? Then I drop my selection. If I do the same thing here, V brings up this view menu. What's that? Well, so I want to make that same selection. Right, obviously you can just press X and select the entire line, but go with me for a second, right? Let's say I want to select more words. I just hold down Shift. Shift! You press the Shift key. There's no visual mode, right? There's one viewer mode. And this is one big thing where a lot of Vim people don't like Helix, is because some motions are longer. A lot of the time, the ones that include V, right, to extend a selection. The way selections work, and like one of the things that both Helix and Kakoune do is multi-cursor, right? It's core to the workflow. It's really powerful, right? So if I come into, I'll do a shit version, and I'll just press S and just do the word reverse, right? Reverse, and then I can just change this to forward, right? Pretty standard stuff, but like inside an entire selection, I can say I can grab so I can make a selection, grab every instance of the word reverse, add it to my search buffer, right? Select the entire document, press S, and I'll grab every instance of that, and it tells me I've got 12 selections, right? Great. That's really, and that's a very basic example, right? You can do lots of stuff. The multi-cursor workflow in Helix/Kakoune is the best multi-cursor I've ever used. It's phenomenal. And they both have macros, but like the use cases for macros and Vim are mostly, a lot of the time, covered by multi-cursor selections, because also multi-cursors can be powered by you can power multi-cursor selections by regex if you want. There's loads of things you can do, and also you can do their replacement by regex because it has an index of the number of selections, so you can do quite complex stuff interactively, right? Whereas like in Vim you have to think about it ahead of time and then just run it like a function, because really, I'm going off topic a little bit, but really when we look at what NeoVim does, when we say delete 2 words, D is a function called delete, and then we're just passing 2 arguments, right? So 2 and W, right? And instead of D, let's just imagine this is called delete. That's how that works, right? You do a function, pass a thing into it, and Helix and Kakoune are more humanistic, where they're like, you make a selection and you create you perform an action on the thing you have selected. So it uses the vernacular of regular computing versus passing arguments into a function, right, interactively. But yeah, the shift thing is a big deal. So a lot of these motions end up being longer by a couple of keys inside Helix a lot of the time. And like, I don't believe in the code golf thing. In fact, actually, the discoverability and it's only one metric, right? You talk about efficiency. Well, it's fewer keystrokes. It's like, yeah. But however, A, how often do you do some of these things? B, like, there's other elements of efficiency, right? Because you have no hand holding, you have no discoverability, very low discoverability inside NeoVim. So if someone doesn't know how to do something, they can't use it, can they? Whereas Helix teaches you to use things. I got better at Vim after learning Helix than I was in Vim in the first place, just by osmosis. Although they're still mutually intelligible. I can still drive Vim, just not that quickly. I'm faster in Helix. I'm not faster in either, really, but I'm faster in Helix. So, and I don't do anything fancy. My usage is so basic, right? I don't do much code golf bullshit. I just sort of do fairly simple edits most of the time. But yeah, so like the thing of having like the lack of this visual mode inside Kakoune actually is a bit of a boon, really. It means selections, you don't have to think about it anymore. Press V, because also weirdly, I always forget to do this, or I'll forget to come out or whatever, because it's natural in Vim, because you don't make selections unless you're in visual mode in Vim. But in Helix, you're always making selections, and you just got to keep it in mind. I have it change color, so I can see. But even then, I forget sometimes, and I'm making correct selections. Versus just pressing Shift, right? So if I do this, hold down Shift. I mean, like so this doesn't come out of the box. So inside Helix, if you press X, selects a line. In Helix, press it again, it selects the next line. By default, Kakoune doesn't select that next line. There are minor differences between them. This I have added into my config, but also pressing like Shift J does exactly the same thing, right? Shift K does exactly the same thing, because you don't have that mode. Anything you press Shift, Shift means extend a selection, right? So holding down Shift and pressing GH, right? So that's one thing it brings in. So GG top, GE end, GH left, GL right, right? Or GH goes up. Does GH go up? Oh, it doesn't actually. What does that do? What does GJ do? Oh! GJ go. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because GJ will go down a line in Helix, but GJ here will go to GK. Oh, okay. In a way, that kind of makes more sense, because this is J and K is obviously down and up, right? But like, yeah, J and K here, pressing GJ goes down one line, whereas here it goes to the top and bottom, which is fine. Again, you can also change it. So yeah, there's that. But also, you know, if you've got like, hello there, right, versus, hello underscore there, right, versus hello there, right. No, that's just not right, is it? Idiot. But anyway, yeah. So your capital word versus word, right? Let's do it like this. Let's do word, comma versus word flat, right? So if we go B and we go, see, we've got word versus word. If we do the same thing, oops, go over here, come over to here, and then paste that in. So yeah, if we press Shift E, it'll do the same thing as Vim. So that's capital E will go to the end of the capital word, right? Include that punctuation. That alternate, that in Kakoune is a little bit different. So that is on Alt. So yeah, if I press Alt E, that'll go to the end. This is the one thing I like less actually, but it's okay. So Alt E will do the same thing. Instead of Shift, it's on Alt, which makes sense. The alternative motion. But given the fact I use Zellage, I have to lock my controls to do it in a minute. But it's secondary. Honestly, I'm lazy and I just press E more times. I'm so inefficient. I'm not very good at counting either. So those are some two major changes in terms of like the day-to-day editing between the two. Otherwise, they're very, very similar, right? Almost identical, in fact, with some minor differences. There's a few things that Kakoune does better in terms of this, and there's a few things that Helix do better. They trade blows. Overall, I think Helix is slightly better because it's for motions is with the exception of the V and Shift thing. Functionally, there's a couple of things that it does. So like, there's this menu inside Helix I love, so I can do MI this, so I can match inside provided character. This trades blows, so I come back to here and I do the same thing down to here. Right, I'll just lock my thing. I'll do Alt inside, right, and then I can do Q. Also, Alt inside, and then what is it? What's the shortcut for this? Boobadoo. So yeah, you can do the same thing. Select inner surrounding object, and then what is the one for? So for that's capital B, Shift B, or you can do the same thing. You don't have to use the shortcut. You can press Shift B if you want to remember it, or you can just do Alt I and then do the same thing. That works the same way. But if I unlock this for a second, come over to here, and then if I want to like surround this, let's get the word flex, right? So MS like that, right? Match surround. So I've made a selection, I'm surrounding it, or I can do MR and then do this and then do this, right? And replace it with replace the brackets. or I could do MR brackets with quotes, right? That's not built in to Kakoune, but that is. But also on the flip side, this M key, which opens up the match menu, this is one of the best features in Christ. The match menu is one of the best things in Helix. It's fucking amazing. So yeah, MM goes to surrounding bracket, surround add, surround replace, surround delete, surround around, select around, select inside, right? And again, you can also do this with multiple selections. Everything works with multiple selections. But inside, so that MM behavior, so come to this one here, MM does this, and it's sort of like, there's another keyboard shortcut for this to flip between them, but I don't remember offhand. But yeah, basically what, there you go, see? And then you can just, it just gets the nearest brackets and then just makes that as a selection. I think there's a thing to insert the selection, but that's what M does inside Kakoune. This is actually pretty useful. I don't know how to edit inside. There must be like a thing, but there's another thing in here because you move around using is it Alt I Alt O? There it is. Is it Alt O? I literally never use this. Control. Is that it? I always forget. There it is. Is it I O? I can't remember. But yeah, you can like zoom in and zoom out of brackets. So if you've got, what's the keyboard shortcut for this? I can't remember. Extend to some. I don't know. I can't remember what it is. But yeah, like so where it's tree sitter, right? So this is built on tree sitter. I could, if I got like multi, so there, this is nested, right? So layer utility. So I can do one selection, which will then basically select everything within these two braces, and then I can extend it out to these two, and it remembers where you started, so you can do out. What is it? Is it out? Oh, there it is. It's Alt I and Alt. Yeah. So if I do Alt I, selects the word, and then O selects the line, then the brace, then the line, then everything between the braces, right? I don't actually use this because I never bother remembering the keyboard shortcut. It's useful on paper. It is really cool. I don't use it. I'm so bad. Maybe like, yeah, I use my ultra efficient modal text editors and I don't use half the fucking features. The reality is I like them because they're fun. It makes editing text a bit like a game is why I like it, to be honest with you. I'm not that efficient. I don't have a split keyboard. I don't know even if it makes me faster, and I kind of don't care. I'm just enjoying it. You know what? Because it's fun, and that's enough. You know, you don't need, not everything needs a reason. But yeah, so apart from that, they're both extremely similar. But where they start to diverge is that thing I just said there, like, you know, the I/O thing, the fact that this is built around tree sitter. There's a tree sitter plugin for this, and that's the other big diversion, right? Is Kakoune is just a text editor. A lot of this are things that I've added, you know, like, so for example, this color change is an option. You can configure Helix to an extent. In fact, let's just go into config, open. Here's my config. So yeah, line numbers relative, true color, cursor line, color modes, buffer lines, you know, all these options, and I've got my keys, and this is just a TOML file. This is great. This is so good. This is such a nice editing experience compared to NeoVim. And like I was saying before, like, I saw NeoVim as like config hell, but I like configuring Kakoune. The reason is Kakoune doesn't have a plugin system, right? Kakoune is a Unix application in like the purest sense. So it doesn't, I think, does it work on Windows? I doubt it works on Windows. You can use it in like Wine if you want in Windows, not Wine, WSL. But yeah, it's Unix philosophy. So basically it's like, fuck you, pipe out to something else. There'll be a tool that does this better, use that. Which means that Kakoune plugins are it's just shell script, right? So I've got another one here, which I've had to put this in as well. If I do config, open config, there we go. I can go to my config file, right? And here is part of it, because I've got multiple files, because it's more than just one TOML file, right? So I'm bringing in my other stuff here. We can go to this later. In fact, I should be able to, if I just do boop. Oh, does it work in quotes? But yeah, here's some of my Kakoune config, and you can see this is basically the extent of the language, right? You've got a little bits and bobs here, right? But then you've got stuff like this, evaluate command, and it's saying, well, just put this in the shell and then return it, right? So that's exactly what I'm doing. So most of it is just writing shell script. I'm not great at shell script, but it's pretty straightforward. So if I go into, let's go let's just create a new window again, and we'll go into CD CAC, and then what have we got? Here we go. So excellent. And things like inside here, I've got like a file viewer. I've had to do this. So if I just do, where is it? Space menu. There we go. So yeah, here we go. You can map keys. So the same. You can do this in Helix as well. But here we've got like, and this is me playing, right? So we've got global space menu. So we've got basically global is just the scope. Space menu is like the context. And then I've set a key, and then I'm saying, well, I've just written a little thing which says FCF file. So let's look at that. So let's just grab that and then just go, boop. Oh, there we go. Where are you? There we are. It was right below. Yeah, and it's just literally, it's piping. It's just some shell script, right? It's piping FD into FCF, right? Fun. And there's little plugins for this. People have like packaged a load of stuff. So if I go back into my CAC-RC file, we've got like this thing called plug, which is really nice. This guy doesn't actually use. This guy's left, but he was a pretty big deal, I think, in the early days. He wrote a bunch of stuff called his plugin system called Plug, and for reasons I can't quite put my. And this is like, you might be looking at this going like, oh, it's a lot like NeoVim, kind of. And I can't. To me, to tell you why this is better, I can't. All I can say is I like doing it here and I don't like doing it in NeoVim. I'm not sure what to tell you, but yeah, we've got a bunch of other scripts here. So some of these I use as plug system. So this is how you load that plugin, and then we've got these other plugs. So we've got auto pairs, which enables spitting out auto pairs, because again, Kakoune has very few opinions about how you're supposed to use it. This little thing here. So we've got this. No, that's the wrong thing. So line by line selection. This is like I wrote this originally myself to do this line extension thing, because I do this all the time in Helix. Again, I can just press Shift K to get the same thing, but I just do this a lot. I just do this an awful lot. I'll select a bunch of lines, I'll delete them all at once, right? Or I'll do like, I don't know, I'll grab like here and I'll press like whatever. I don't know, I'll just like do lots of multi-line selections. I don't know, I'm an idiot, whatever. Point is, someone made a thing which works. Auto pairs, there's my options for auto pairs. There's also this little power line thing, which is really fun. So down here, so Helix doesn't have, let's just close down that one. So yeah, Helix doesn't have a configurable power line. This does, because again, it's much less, instead of building a plugin system, they've gone, no, just use the Unix shit. There'll be something out there that does it, or just write it in a shell script, it's fine. And it means that the core of Kakoune is tiny. So one of the things that even Helix does, not even Helix, but Helix does, I mean, I still love Helix, it's fantastic. But one thing that Helix does that NeoVim doesn't is Helix is rapid fast. It's so quick. Like, it's insanely fast. It's like very, very responsive, very, very quick, very light compared to NeoVim. Well, compared to everything, right? So it's like, it's Sublime Text levels of quick. It's probably, apart from it can't load files as large as Sublime Text can, it's extremely rapid. It's the most interactive thing. I used an editor called Nova for ages, and the thing that made me use, ultimately the main thing that made me use Nova is when they rewrote they had their own text parsing from Mac. It's not Mac only app. The way the text handling worked, they rewrote their own engine for it to make it feel better. And I was like, that sounds like bollocks. And then once you used it, you were like, oh, okay, there's like this latency when you tap keys in a computer that you don't realize is there, and it wasn't there anymore. I was like, oh shit, that's weird. And it made like using VS Code or something feel like typing through sludge, and it's like this almost, if I showed you, you couldn't see it but you can feel it type thing. It's meant like everything you were writing felt more immediate, and that same delay exists in NeoVim, and it's not in Helix, and it's not in Kakoune. Kakoune is even faster than Helix, which is bananas, but not in any way that makes sense. They're both incredibly fast. It's just that Kakoune's smaller, right? So it's going to be a little bit faster. It's a smaller program. Plus also, if things break, so if your external thing breaks, it doesn't pull down Kakoune, right? It won't crash. It's much more mature. It's like 14, 15 years old. And also actually, there's another important thing is also you have Clippy, and Clippy's great. But yeah, I've built a bunch of other crap in here. Things like I've got a little file picker for picking the syntax for a language, and you can just wrap existing stuff in menus pretty quickly. It feels quite scrappy and like it feels like it's very script kiddie, right? It's probably why I like it because ultimately I'm like I'm like a developer in a way, but I'm like more like an evolved version of a script kiddie, right? Like a script kiddie who's been doing it for 20 years, really is what I am. So that's probably why it appeals to me. But yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. And yeah, I can just wrap. If something doesn't exist, I can just wrap new functionality around it pretty quickly, rather than having to like bother learning an entire language. A lot of the time, like it will just be redefining a key, but a key could just be a shell script, right? You can do the same thing in Helix actually, and that's where it shares some of that philosophy. So you can pipe things straight out. So I can just do I can straight write in both, just write pipe and then just pipe a thing in, right? So I just do like. It's not going to do anything. Let's do that. Let's do cow say hello, and then let's join. You can do the same thing in Helix. But yes, I have cow say. Why would I not have cow say? What's wrong with you? Of course I've got cow say. But yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. But yeah, if something else breaks or fails outside, it's just a shell script. Like one good example, is it in here or in another file? I can't remember. I need to organize all of this. It's all very much like stream of consciousness. There we go. This thing, client name gen. So where down here it says Daft Pony. One thing that Helix doesn't have, which is I think is probably its biggest failings. I'm in Zellage right now. I love Zellage. I think it's great. Terminal multiplexers are awesome. But if I'll have a load of files open at once, right? So one thing I don't have inside of Kakoune is I don't have like a buffer line with my open files, and I do in Helix. But what I do in Helix, I have this B menu, which is default in Helix. So B, which is like the files you have open, right? So space B, and then I just do this all the time, right? And there's also another one's like GP or GN, so go previous, go next. The go-to menu, which Kakoune also has. So yeah, there we go, go to, but I've added previous and next buffer personally. But yeah, last change, so you can go to the last thing you did or the most recently edited file, that kind of stuff. That's how I navigate, right? So that doesn't exist in Kakoune out of the box, so I had to add my own little menu. That's fine. This F menu, so yeah, space E, space F, sorry. Space F brings up, this is just FCF. This is built in Helix. This is actually better than the one I've got, to be honest. I could probably do some more work on my one, but whatever. I want it to be FCF. I like FCF a lot. FCF's a bit like one of my favourite little terminal applications. I know, hot take, FCF is good. But yeah, like, so one thing that Helix doesn't do, right, so which is in the context of using like a terminal multiplexer, right, so if I've got this, what I can do, so like if I've got a full project open, I'm swapping between a bunch of files. You've noticed me doing this already, right? I have this little binding inside Zellage to press Alt space full screen's a thing for me to focus on it, or if I have more than one open, I do this all the time. Oh, let's pay attention to this window for a bit, and I'll jump between, right? I might be in two disparate areas or something, and I'll have a bunch of different windows open. It's just a workflow I've always liked this, right? Yeah, it's a way about. But then with Helix, each one's its own instance, right? So if I have the same project open in two windows, between the two, there's no correlation, right? They're just two separate instances. So I'll have two tabs open. And I'll have to manually come in here, and I do this all the time. I have to reload a version, so I might have the same file open on both sides at one point, because I'll be jumping back and forth. And for whatever reason, this one's open. I have to keep in my mind when I opened it, right? And then I have to manually reload it. Sometimes I use this as like an impromptu scratch buffer, right? So I have like a bunch of changes on the right-hand side one that I'm not sure about yet. and I'll be working over here for a bit, and I'll come back, and I might even open that same file, make a different set of changes, and I can compare the two of them and be like, what do I feel? How do I feel? You know, it's a weird little semi-workflow. I know Git exists, but people are flawed creatures. But that's a very long way of saying I can just do this in Kakoune, and these are the same session, right? So they're different names. So this is my client, and this is my session. So 8044, 8044. If I come in here and I go hello, and then come over here, just go like that. See, it's all linked, right? So linked session. You know, this is killer, right? This is great. So they're linked. They are linked. Excellent. So it just runs a single process under the hood, and then I can just, this problem is now solved. One of the biggest things I like about Kakoune is it does this. The fact that, yeah, it's client based. But yeah, like I need to be able to sort of differentiate them, and by default it gives it client 0, client 1. So one of the first things, which is very, very silly, very, very dumb, is this thing here, which is like it generates this name, and effectively client names, and this is a crystal file because I'm a moron who really likes Ruby syntax, and yeah, it's just one big array called adjectives and one big array. There we go. One called adjectives and one called nouns, and it just spits out a string. 250 lines of complete bollocks, which makes these cute names because they do it in Zellige, and I really like it. It's called Remarkable Xylophone, and I've done the same thing. Apart from I've got some fun ones like the word cromulent and some that start with Christher. So one of my favourite ones is I had one of these sessions turn up the other day called Spanish Printer, and I laughed for about 10 minutes. But yeah, you just pipe things out into, in this case, a crystal file. Perfect for that. Crystal's nice and fast, so it generates. Yeah, when it opens up, it just generates a little name and moves on. So you delegate all of that to shell scripts or to processes. So where you don't have a plugin language, all the sort of Kakoune scripting knows how to do is return things by like standard IO. Or there's got like this FIFO thing I've not really used yet, which is like first in, first out for stringing information in and out of like other processes. Basically, like I'll just take the shit you give me, and people have used that to build. So I've got LSPs running. I haven't done Tree Sitter yet, but there's a Tree Sitter plugin for Kakoune. Again, it's just a bunch of shell scripts sellotape together, but there's the magic of that being a bunch of shell scripts sellotape together, right? And this does not need to be a crystal file at all. It's just because I felt like it. It's a test. But that's the thing. Where you don't have... You have the bindings you need to get anything you need in and out of the system, which definitely has pros and cons, but one of the big pros is the system on the other end can do anything, right? So like one thing I'm going to add, which I can, which should be fairly trivial, is I'm going to add both Git and fossil status into my Finder, right? My file thing here. So right now, I want to make this so this just like returns everything that's in the directory, right? So I'm going to make it so anything that's inside either a git ignore or a fossil ignore is like filtered out by default. Or I want another view which will have like the things that are tracked by fossil or git. And that's pretty simple. Again, all you've got to do is you can just pipe that to git or fossil respectively. And then you just pass it through FCF, and then you just say, open up a floating window in Zellige, and it'll just do it. There's a few little sort of like slight things that I don't love here. So like one really good example, I've got this open, right? And I use these floats all the time. Let's close that. So I use these floats all the time. So like, let's say if I've got a server running, in this case, let's say like I've got, let's say I've got like Vite running, right? Or like, yeah, so I'm doing like npm run dev, right? I'll put this in a window, and then I'll just close this down. It'll be in the background, so I don't have to look at it all the time, right? But then if this is open, I'll just close this for a second. I press this, right, and I go into a new file. Let's go into colors. It keeps this one open. It's a little weird bug where it doesn't cleanly close. It doesn't know which one. Again, I can work on it, but it doesn't cleanly close the other Zellige floats. It opens those up as well and leaves those open. Because when I do this change, so I close this down again, so press Alt F, press space F, go into, let's say, CAC RC again, it'll open the other one up, right? Because when I press enter, it closes the current Zoology float I've got. It's just a little bit annoying, right? But when it's solvable. So it is still quite manual, and so previously I'd done this with television, which is really cool, by the way. I want to use it for something. This ended up being much simpler to write, so I did it with FCF instead, because television's a bit different. I might still redo it with television. It was just a bit more annoying to get the right stuff back out, but television's really fun. You should have a go at television. It's pretty cool. But yeah, if I want to say I want a file tree, or that scenario earlier, I want this to exclude files that are, you know, in like fossil extras, right? Then I can do that. It's pretty good. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to jump off, because I've got to go do things. But that's kind of like going to be the gist of kind of like the Kakoune video, I guess. Probably a much more condensed version of what I've just said. But yeah, overall, to summarize and to cap off this very long streaming session, actually, is Fossil's really good, right? In a lot of scenarios, it's probably a better tool than Git. You should look at it. It's awesome. I'm going to try and get my video out. No one talks about it on the internet. It's not that popular. It needs more attention, I think. AI's rubbish. Frankly, if you're a decent engineer, make sure you're actually doing, or even like me, a crap engineer, make sure you're still using your skills, and make sure you're using your thinkies as much as possible, because it's not good. And Kakoune is awesome. Also, have a look when I release it at my CSS thing. You'll probably hate it, but that's fine. We can all like things, we all hate things, and you get to see how shit my code is. Great. And one other thing, actually, which I've not really mentioned, just on my way out, is with the thing I showed at the beginning of the stream, was I'm working on two things, or I will be working on two things. Is as I'm continue to test out Fossil. So as you may or may not know if you've been here before, I'm not a developer by trade. I do a lot of development, but that's not my main job. I've always done development as part of my job, but primarily I am a designer, and I am a product designer. So I care about things working nicely. I just have some of the skills to make them, as well as just draw pictures of them, right? So with the stuff with Fossil, we'll see in the beginning of my video, I have been writing a thing called FSL, which is a little command line utility wrapper for Fossil. And what it does, it's not anywhere humans can see it yet, but it will hopefully be at some point when it's in less of an embarrassing state. It's like, I'm playing it for like a day or two. It's not anything yet. But yeah, the idea is it'll be like a little wrapper which should bring much better quote-unquote DX around interacting with Fossil. It won't be a tidy tool, a well-engineered tool. I'm not a good engineer. Well, no, I'm okay. I don't know, whatever. I'm a bad coder, right? But an okay engineer. Yeah, so that does things like, because there's a few sort of like rough edges in Kakoune which don't hold your hand, and also like Git's the same, to be fair. Like you've got help, whatever, but like a few things are just sort of like slightly nicer adds. So like, for example, if you write FSL add and then press enter, if you don't specify a file name, it'll open you up into, once again, FCF, and it will let you interactively select files from your list of from your directories to add. I've got another one called unadd, which does the opposite, which you can remove things from tracking as well, or untrack things. That does the same. I've got a list of things I want to do. One is ignores. So the way ignores work inside Fossil is kind of weird. If I was designing this as a product, I would have done it very differently. But where Fossil's a web server, so a lot of the options you can set, and everything you do on the command line you can do in the interface as well, right? You can't make commits, but anything about managing that repo you can do from that Fossil UI thing. And one of them is any settings. So that can be like how branches behave, the colors, the name of the tags, whatever. One thing you can do is you can manage your ignores there, right? So you can actually have an interface where you can paste in lines for your ignore. Sounds great, but then how do you do that from the command line? By default, you don't, right? So you have to go into the Fossil UI, write your ignore into this ignore file. But you can have a file, right? The equivalent of git ignore. It's called let's go back to where's a good example of that? Let's go to just go to FSL actually. So yeah, if you go, yeah, here we go. It's this ignore hyphen glob, right? So cd.fossil settings ls. There you go. I've got two, but yeah. So it's this one here, right? So you have an optional dot directory called fossil settings, and any various fossil settings, not all of them, can be version managed, right? So not all of them. So when you get, just open this up. So it's just FSL UI. So we come into here, and I come into admin, configuration, whatever. Some of these, I can't remember where it tells you. I think it's it's not very well organized. Is it settings, or I think it's there we go. Here we go. Excellent. Right. So if I go all, there we go. So anything with a V next to it is versionable. Anything that isn't is not, right? So encoding, I mean, I don't know what half these fucking do. But yeah, so you've got like, yeah, dot files, encoding glob, ignore glob, keep glob, mime types, etc. These are all versionable. And it tells you here, settings marked with V are versionable, and we overridden by the contents of the manage file, fossil settings, setting name, right? So if you have a corresponding file, it will read that in preference to the UI. If the file for a versionable setting exists, the value cannot be changed on this screen. So this is where my inner product designer comes out and it goes, fuck me, to find that, you have to know to come into admin, then not configuration, settings, which is separate from configuration. You know, this is my day job. And I've got my ignore glob here, which has test in it, right? So that's one thing that FSL does, is it will generate. So if you run FSL ignore, it does like I've not finished it. I need to finish it off, but it'll do one of three things. This is what I'm saying for the DX. So it will like find if you've got, so if you've downloaded a Git repo or like a third party library or something, right? It will detect if there's a git ignore file, and it optionally converts that to a fossil ignore for you. If you don't have a fossil ignore and it's not a git repo, it will detect that it's not there and then create it for you. And if you run it after it exists, then it will give you that same. You can either pass in just an array of, or whatever, like space separated list of files or an array of files or whatever to add to your ignore, or you can do it the same way you can with fossil add, press enter, and it will give you a little FCF list of the files you've got to add to your ignore if you want to add them to your ignore. You can press enter and add them. So things like that, right? Like interactive tooling, or things like, I'm going to build like an interactive branch switcher. Again, so much this is basically taking existing commands and just piping them through FCF, or things like one that's in there already is FCF diff. So not FCF diff, sorry. It's basically like this fossil diff. So you can just diff anything. So if I do, I'll show you actually, it's probably the easiest way to do it. So if I come into here, just close this down. So if I do so if I do fossil diff, right, it will just give me a diff. If I do FSL diff, it does the same thing, but it just pipes it through BAT, right? Simple stuff. It's just like making everything a little bit nicer. I love this. I have to delete that. Great. So, and it's just a few of those. I've got like a list of other things I want to hit, but I'm going to go quite slowly, and at some point I'll release it. The same thing is, we go back into, and if it doesn't exist, it just passes through to fossil. So anything that doesn't, you can use FSL, and it's got some new commands, but if you just type in something else, I just pass the args straight through. And like anything that I don't support, I always pass the extra args straight through, so making it so it's like always additive and not diversionary. And if it is different, it's name different. So like fossil ignore does not exist, FSL ignore does. So that's the rationale. We'll see how we go with it. But what was I about to show you? Oh yeah, that was the other bit. So as I work this more, I think I was saying I've only experimented with this on a couple of like actual working little things, nothing major. And the next thing is using or trying to see if I can convert a working real code project, which is a bit more involved, I guess, into Fossil and see how that goes. And as part of that, I am going to be working on this, right? So if I do whatever, if I just do, let's do this, right? I go timeline. Excellent. Timeline, I can do doop, JSON timeline. Check in. Right? I've got JSON. There's a full JSON API, which is great. So Fossil third detection obviously does not work. Thank you. 2 a.m. me. Great. So yeah, there's a JSON API. So what I'm going to be doing off the back of that, FSL is going to have its own alternative front end for Fossil, which has better UX. Basically, it's not going to do anything that Fossil can't do. It's not going to be a massive diversion. I'm not, there's a slight commercial interest in it for me. I'm not interested in selling something like that because it's not fair. I don't like the idea of just wrapping up someone's open source work and like clinging on it like a little limpet. What I will add to it though, which is like the minor commercial add, is my other software is basically it's like product manage. It's like it's tools for product managers, so it's not Jira. But imagine if Jira is more geared to the product manager, not the developer, right? So it's not as fine-grained. It's more about stories and outcomes and reporting, and for stakeholders more than for Jira tasks level stuff. Where this shares a similar set of opinions. So a big thing in my other piece of software, the biggest thing actually really is two things. One is semantic, is reporting, right? So adding meaning to reports. So instead of just having status, it's how statuses get to where they are. And the other one is things don't hide. It's a really simple application. It's deceptively simple. If you open it up, it's going to look a little bit like it's a task list, to be honest. It really fucking isn't, but it will trick you into thinking that it is, because it hides its complexity. So it's supposed to be very low learning curve, and you can incrementally add the features you need into it to make it a more fully fledged thing. If you open it up and start adding stuff to it, it'll just look pretty straightforward. You don't have to turn it on, but it's got things like progress tracking, effort, you know what I mean? Very extensive capturing of information. It's got task relationships. It's got statuses per project statuses, loads of other stuff, a full communication system, notification system for stakeholders, user management, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, reporting, all this sort of crap. So it does a bunch of stuff, but it hides a lot of that complexity from you, is the idea. So it's supposed to be very low cognitive load to use it. Because again, Jira's a nightmare, right? And then you've got Linear, which is awesome. I like Linear, but it's extremely opinionated, and like some opinions strongly held versus not. So an opinion on like you have these things available. I think it's I've got like a, looking at all of this, I think I've got like a my own, I guess, philosophy for software, which is probably like there's some things this does and some things that don't, but the things it does make certain things really convenient, but it doesn't force you into working a certain way. But there's lots of convenient stuff here that makes your life easier. Go nuts, right? So like in the other product, the thing of it is, for example, you can't nest tasks, which sounds crazy, but you've got loads of visibility tools, which means you can always see them in context of each other, right? So if I've got like a bunch of related tasks, to see them, I don't have to go in and navigate to the tasks inside. I can see them inside the task, but I can also just click a button and it will show me those task relations. They're not nested, they are just task relations, and you have multiple types of relations. So instead of just belonging to and blocked by, you can have any number of single or bidirectional types of relationship, and it'll break all of those out in line with their relationship type. This was saying earlier about that more novel way of working with information, right? So you get a contextual view of every task relation diegetically in view of the task, and they can't hide because that other task is also in that list. So if the list is long, you just get to see how they relate in line plus elsewhere. So it makes it very flexible, and it doesn't force you down specific workflows, right? So where that fits in is, going back to my point, is for my little Fossil front end, I'll be adding the API connection so you can link these together, right? Because this whole concept here, this timeline, which for me is the killer feature ultimately in Fossil, means that I get the developer end of this equation for free via Fossil. The tooling itself will be free, obviously. Like it will never be, like, I don't believe in the paid thing will be not open source. the product thing is not open source, but it's not evil, right? I think I've gone into this in a bunch of videos. I don't like evil software. So some very important things are like, yes, it is SaaS. I've explored the idea of making it so it's like a version thing that you pay for once or whatever, or pay for like, you know, per release or something. I don't think people will go for that, to be honest. And it's a B2B tool, it's not B2C, so and it's very geared towards a small market, so it's priced in such a way that it should make sense to use. But other things that are really important, like privacy, is extremely important, and also data ownership. So the idea is, like with this, the end users own all of their data. There's also like an informal covenant for the business, is the idea that like no one, if you were to take investment, which I wouldn't really want to if I could get away with it, the rules would be, for your money you get nothing, right? You get your money back, but you get no say, right, in the running of what we do. So you insulate yourselves from like doing the dark pattern stuff. There's no begging, there's no tears, there's no like, there might be tears, but like there's no shady practices. It's all quite transparent, quite fair, quite open, and just try and be a nice product for people to use without any weird stings in the tails and without enshittification, because I fucking hate enshittification. So I'm trying to make a moderately ethical product. I'm not trying to be a hippie, or I think it's a better way to conduct yourself than that disingenuous thing a lot of things do, where they go, oh, it's open source, asterisk, where actually it's a commercial product you get to make PRs to, and they get to say it's open source, but really it's not. It's a commercial product that you get to see. You know, it'll be a bit like that, but not really. It's not pretending. I'm not saying, oh, it's open source, but anything I did with this would be open source. The thing would be, it would have a button in there which would basically say, yeah, you can connect this to the tool I'm not going to tell you the name of, and that would exist. There's like a sort of a pseudo upsell, but that would be the end of it. It would be mentioned, and I'd probably make it also something you could just turn off. And then anything I did with this, I would give it away for free. Same with FSL, so you can not use it. And I'll keep revisiting that idea until it's not evil. But that's not even necessarily going to happen. That's just a fag, what we call in the UK a fag packet idea, which probably sounds like a slur. Cigarette packet, right? So the idea is, when old school, no one smokes anymore, but like whenever you used to smoke, you'd have an idea, and what you'd do is you'd open up the top of America's paper packets. We have cardboard boxes here, right? You'd open up the lid and you'd open up the cigarette packet with paper, and you'd write on the inside of the cigarette packet, or you'd rip the lid off, or you'd write. I think people used to write notes on cigarette packets, right? For rough notes. So when you say something is the back of a fag packet idea, it's a rough idea that you've written on the back of a cigarette box. It's a very old school turn of phrase, to be honest now. But yeah, that's not a guarantee. But either way, whatever I do with either of those tools, if I do get it to a point, the fossil interface thing, which I'm going to experiment with over this weekend, would be, I think that's open source. I might stream some of it. I have some rusty areas I need to knock the rust off of, so I don't think I want to stream myself coding, because lest I embarrass myself, because I'm a little bit slow at the minute. Because yeah, I'm not LLMing again, so certain stuff I've got to, so the front end I'm going to do in Ember, because I like Ember a lot, and I have not written any Ember in a little while, but I've not done any manually in quite a while. I've not written any JavaScript manually in about 3 months, because I hate writing JavaScript. So 3 months, maybe longer, 4 months, 5 months. So yeah, I'm probably not going to subject you to watching me try and half remember, because I context switch a lot, so watching me half remember half the fucking JavaScript syntax in real time is not something people should have to watch. I go, oh, what's a semicolon? Not really, not what's a semicolon. You know what I mean? Like, I forget stuff, because I write Ruby half the time. And Ruby has none of that shit. I love Ruby. Getting back to my main point though, yeah, so yeah, that's the end of the stream, basically. so bye. If you stumble across this, then good on you, I guess, if you watch this for however long